PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
Oh, hello, everybody.
Hello there. One cup of coffee. Ha, ha, ha.
Two cups of coffee. And a happy Halloween to all of you out
That's
there
right.
today who are watching this. And here we are talking about Friday the 13th, Part 6, which is kind of a Halloween movie, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely a Halloween movie. It's a spooky movie, you know. We did our Halloween franchise last year. This year's franchise.
That's what it just feels weird.
I know. This year we're doing Friday the 13th. Hell, next year I think we'll do Nightmare. We'll make the big three by next Halloween. That'll be our big one then. But yeah.
So that means the year after we're finally doing my series.
Well, you have a couple of different series, so I'm going to hope it's
The
not
Puppet Master.
I'd rather do Phantasm. I'd rather do. There's plenty of other of your series I'd rather do than Puppet Master. Let me tell you. And you know what? That's coming from somebody as much as I give you. I like the original Puppet Master. I just don't look forward to 12 or 13 of them.
I mean, to be fair, I think there's people who look at us and go, they're not looking forward to 12 or 13 Halloween movies and Friday the 13th movies either.
Fair,
and yet here you and I are.
That's a fair statement. And I will admit that I'm sure if we go long enough, I'm quite sure we will eventually get to Puppet Master. But
yeah,
it's a long way.
It's the dream.
It is the dream. I think we got to get a couple of short ones in there. I don't know. You know what? We do though. You know what? Thinking about it, I mean, it's a long time away. We do kind of got to figure out eventually what the next big series during Halloween will be.
I mean, I think you just said it. I think it's going to be Nightmare.
I mean, post Nightmare. But that's what I'm saying. It's a long time away. Like Nightmare is definitely got to be next year. I think you got to get the big three in there. And then after that, I don't know. There's a couple.
I think honestly, Child's Play ends up being because especially now. Granted, it gets a little complicated because now it is continued as a TV show and we're 3 seasons in. But
I don't know if we
there
did
are
the TV
7
show.
movies.
Yeah, I think we stick to the movies as far as I think that'd be my own thing. Because I don't want to get into TV on this show particularly. It's kind of like a different kind of. I mean, we could mention and talk about.
Oh, I know, but the problem is that the franchise like legitimately continues because the cliffhanger of Cult of Chucky is picked up
in the series
in a TV series.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is very comical, and then you have to kind of deal with that.
That's a big question. I'll throw this at you, and I know this might be an age thing as well. But back in the day, you'd say Michael, Jason, Freddy were the horror icons. Like they were the big three of the slasher icons. And I kind of say I think Leatherface was put up as the next thing, the 1A kind of thing. Has Chucky surpassed him? Ghostface as well, which you've already covered in the Scream franchise. But Ghostface always felt like something a little separate because it was just as much like parody as it was real. So kind of like I felt like that was a separate kind of thing. In terms of like the big like ghost or horror icons though, as far as that goes, I know there's people out there yelling at me now because of my scream takes. I still never lived down that one like ranking thing I did on PLD Project a long time ago.
Oh, I remember. And I tried to let you go. You know, I've tried not to bring this up ever again, and yet here we are. You started it all over.
You know what? I still think I on a purely basis, Scream is an S tier franchise. But during the thing, I had to only have 5, so I kicked it down to A tier. They're acting like I hate the series. I'm like, I don't hate the series. I love the series. It just got barely knocked down to A tier. But all right, we won't talk about that anymore. But the question I have is now we had Leatherface as the big icon. Has Chucky really surpassed him at this point? Is Chucky greater than Leatherface? And I'm not saying it's quality of movies because quality movies, I think without doubt, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre has the great original but tough to watch original, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And they don't have many great sequels. I think the ones in the 2000s, like the ones with Arlie Emery and things like that, those are pretty good and pretty watchable. But overall, Leatherface versus Chucky.
I think you have to give the nod to the ginger-headed murder doll. I mean, honestly, the funny thing is, and you and I have talked about this a lot in like backroom hangouts and stuff of
It makes it sound very seedy,
the
though.
chi Yeah, oh, I know. That's why I did it. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wanted it to sound as seedy and bad as possible.
Fair.
Um, but
That's fair.
the Child's Play franchise arguably and honestly is maybe the most consistent horror franchise, in a way that people don't actually give it a lot of credit for. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is it ended up being, like, well ahead of its time too, because when you get to see the Chucky, the stuff that movie is doing is wildly, wildly ahead of what you're anticipating a movie in the 2000s to be talking about,
Right.
especially when it comes to, identity and
Yeah.
trans people, and the funny thing is Bride of Chucky is very clearly also birthed from this, which we're about to talk
Right.
about today, Jason Lives, because a lot of that film coming back and them doing it is very much campy, meta, like universal monstery, like
Yeah.
they treated it the same exact way.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that
And
too. You said that about Sea
yeah,
Chucky, especially also Sea Chucky, with God, I'm blanking on his name from Lord of the Rings, Billy Boyd, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that idea of like pushing forward trans and identity well ahead of its time, well ahead of its time, to the point where like it could come out this year and feel like completely fresh and new,
mhm,
comparatively. No, and I do think you're right to a degree. I got to say that because again, this is an age thing. Being older than you, Leatherface was huge back in the '80s,
oh yeah, and there's no denying
comparatively.
that.
Right. But I do think nowadays, I mean, they both had films recently. They both I mean, Chucky had the reboot, Child's Play. I should say Child's Play had the reboot because they didn't have the
Yeah,
complete rights. And Chucky has a TV series. We did have a recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which a lot of people really hated. I dug it.
I
I didn't
didn't
mind
hate
it.
it.
I
Yeah,
didn't hate it.
I
Like I thought
liked
there
it
was some
more
bit to
than,
it.
most people, I think.
Yeah, same. So there's a world where I can see us doing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series at some point because the first is good. Two is actually really fun, also, and again, kind of ahead of its time in a way. Like this film, two is very much it turns into a horror comedy, which is weird considering the first one. Like this Jason had what six? This is the sixth one in the series before it gets to the comedy. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, iconic horror, like seedy, dirty film, and the second film is like a comedy. It's like, wait, what just happened? And it's the same director. You're like, what the hell just happened? I don't get what's going on here.
Mhm.
But it was actually what I hated when I first watched it, but now I've come around on it. Three is okay. But McConaughey thing is bad, is one of the worst pieces of shit I've ever seen. But then it comes
It
back to the good ones. Some good ones, I should say.
it's so funny because, like, I just do not really gel with the franchise overall. I mean,
Mhm.
I understand the reverence for it. I like the original very much, but to your point, it's so grimy and dirty, and it's actually very hard to watch.
Yeah.
It makes me feel not good, and I mean, I arguably that's the point, but
Right. Absolutely.
it's one of those, like, doesn't quite I get why it's popular, but it doesn't quite work for me, right?
Right.
It The second one is my favorite of the franchise. I think it's so wonderful and so fun, and again, like, still grimy and weird, but in a Rob Zombie sort of way. Honestly, I've still contend to this day, and yeah, granted, House of a Thousand Corpses is basically him doing his own Texas Chainsaw, but
100%.
I've said it since the beginning, even when we did our Halloween retrospective and we got to his movies, I always thought he was much more fitted for Texas Chainsaw than he was Halloween, because how he makes movies very grindhouse-like and how tortured and dark and weird his characters are, it would have been a match made in hell in the right way.
I actually fully agree. We've had that conversation before. This is coming as someone who actually appreciated what he did for Halloween, and we both actually really, especially in retrospect, changed our mind on Halloween too. I brought you a little bit higher up into Halloween too in our conversation, I think, and
I love
I do
Halloween
really
too.
enjoy it. I actually really enjoyed it. I wouldn't go ahead and watch today, but at the same time, it's definitely his aesthetic is far more Texas Chainsaw than it was Halloween. But at the same time, someone argue that makes it an actually more of an interesting choice for Halloween, taking that kind of
Oh,
thing. It's
yeah,
almost
I
like
guess.
I almost would. It'd be interesting to someone to take a Halloween take to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't know if that would work, but who knows? Like that's the kind of cool things about film. You can take these chances. And unfortunately, it feels like chances are being taken less and less. Sometimes it feels like like we're heading towards this place of safety, which I don't love. And I can't really point anything specifically out right now off the top of my head, but like it just feels like we're taking away these chances for directors to do things that they want to do and take these like this today's movie is a perfect example. Tom McLaughlin takes a big chance on the tone and everything else with Jason Lives. Something that needed to be done after what happened with 5, but nowadays I don't know if you'd be allowed to do that. Studio kind of have these like numbers they want to paint by. They want to hit the certain demographics. They want to do this. They don't want, and we end up getting these films that are good a lot of times, but like they feel like I want to get something more auteur like sometimes. Get somebody in there who just has a completely whacked out idea. Give them a shot. Sometimes they might fucking shit the bed and it's awful, but sometimes you get something like today's movie, which really kind of reinvents the wheel as far as the franchise goes, and kind of I don't want to say reinvents the wheel as far as the genre goes, but it took it in a new direction and definitely inspires some things later on. Like we don't get Scream without Jason Lives, absolutely.
I mean, in the same way, again, the Child's Play franchise probably doesn't survive if it isn't for Jason Lives. Like, I don't know if Bride of Chucky ends up being what it is or even existing. Because I mean, remember, Child's Play 3, very similarly to Friday Part 5, was not very beloved, and so like it. I mean, now granted, Jason Lives still comes out like a year and some change later,
Right.
basically from Part 5, but the Child's Play franchise sat on the shelf for like the longest because of what happened with the third one.
Yeah,
And when they brought it back, it was just a totally different. I mean, dude, fucking John Ritter is in that movie.
Right.
Like people forget that John Ritter is like one of the leads of a Child's Play.
That's the weirdest thing you could say to me, quite frankly. It's such a weird concept. I've
Well,
seen the movie. I still get like, oh yeah, wow, geez.
the funniest thing is then Jason Ritter, his son, is the lead of Freddy versus Jason right around the same time.
Right. There's
So they're
Ritters all
both
over.
kind of playing in the horror universes of all of it.
Yeah.
I will always be a little sad that we never saw Freddy and Chucky cross over just for the banter. I feel like if you had the two of those characters bantering back and forth, you could have done something really fun. But there's just no world where a crossover with those characters makes
Maybe
any sense.
maybe a Big Finish type so you can do an audio version because Robert Englund might be too old to get into the makeup, but just Robert
Yeah.
Englund and Brad Dourif going at it for a little while, I think that'd be
Oh
fun.
yeah,
That'd be fun just like that.
I would have loved that. I mean, granted, in the same way, a lot of people. It's so funny. I've had people who have told me that Freddy versus Jason versus Ash would never have worked because those characters don't make sense together, and you can't cross it over. And it's like, well, actually, like once you read it, you're like, those three worlds make a lot of sense together. There is a world I think that maybe Child's Play and Nightmare kind of make sense together, a tiny bit. Just
You
with
can make
the
it work. You can
yeah.
make anything work. In fact, like I mean, this is already kind of spoiler alert into a little bit of the breakdown of this film. Like, there's a certain I don't give a fuck about what's going on or what happened previously.
Well, right.
Like that, if you have the right tone, if you have the right mindset, and you execute, that fans will go along with it. They'll kind of go, yeah, there's some really, all right, I'm on board. Let's do this thing. Kind of thing. Like you got to get over that. Once you get over that, I think there's ways to get over that. When if like you give a little bit of wink and nudge to the audience, like, yeah, you know what, you're right. These don't really work to a degree, but come along, we're gonna have a good time, and you can do it. And that's what I think you could totally do. I think with the whole thing with Freddy, Jason, Nash, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, from what I remember, the hardest thing about it was Sam Raimi wanting like to have complete control, possibly him and Campbell. Like he didn't want to
Well, and
relinquish too
then
much control.
ultimately, and basically wanting to get to do Evil Dead 4, which is basically why they killed it, was he said in the end he wanted to do a fourth film and he
Right.
wanted nothing to do with the wildness of what that is,
Right. And that's completely fair. It's unfortunate,
It's
but
fair and
fair.
fine, yeah.
I would love to have seen
I
that. I would
just
love to have seen that.
wish well, thank God the comic exists. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is exactly the script and the story, which was
Right.
fantastic.
Right.
And I'm very happy that it comes together the way it does because it does prove that they really could have made a really fantastic film.
Yeah.
Crossovers are always fun if they're done correctly.
I still can't believe
I
we
have
never got a Freddy vs. Jason sequel, even without Ash. You think, even with like the whole Evil Dead of it taken out, I still feel like there was so much they could have done with that as a franchise. But it's unfortunate they
It's
just
funny you
took
say
out.
that because I think that a lot too. You look at it and it's like that movie ended up making almost $120 million. It made four
Yeah,
times its budget, basically. Like,
yeah,
and people love it. I think that over time too, its reverence has actually grown a little bit.
I
Like,
think so
so
too.
you look back and you're like, man, that was actually like
A lot of fun.
so ambitious and so fun, and
Yeah.
it works. And
Mhm.
I think a part of it is they just threw so many different ideas out the window, and I think that they really got caught up on the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. I mean, again, to the point that they made a comic book out of it
Yeah.
and worked through what the story would have been, but they had gotten so far in it. I think that once that was the direction they were going, and then it
They
fell
couldn't
apart, I think it
reset.
just, yeah, there was no reset because I will always point to the sequel of that never happening sort of being the thing that seems to push the remakes and reboots craze
Yeah.
suddenly out of nowhere. Because once the two titans of horror fall and you don't make a sequel to it and everyone starts rebooting those properties,
Right.
everyone else starts jumping on it. And so that was kind of the weird place of where it happened. It was that, that 2007 Halloween, 2009
9
was
Friday.
Friday, then there was Nightmare, and
Right.
they just kinda kept going. And I mean, there was all the J horror remakes in the 2000s too, but Freddy versus Jason's sequel never happening seemed to be the catalyst of so much of that like lunging forward. And I think that's
Yeah.
also because Texas Chainsaw was so popular when it came
Right,
out.
the
The
remake of
the
yeah,
remake.
the new
Yeah.
universe, whatever. No, I agree, and I also think also there probably was a little bit of studio fatigue as far as that film, the original Freddy vs. Jason took like 10 years to actually make, like, they had the
There's an
sparks of
entire
it
book
back
about
then.
it.
Yeah, I actually read that book, and I
I
love
have
that
it.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually a fun book. It goes through, like, so many iterations, so many scripts, and so many rights issues, and so, like, some of these people had really great intentions with trying to get something done. It's amazing some of the concepts that were brought together. Some of them brought in Hellraiser, brought in Pinhead and stuff. There's a lot of really cool things that were thrown out there. Some of them were god awful. I'm not gonna lie. Some of them like real like that would not have worked. But what we ended up getting was probably one of the best of the bunch. There's a lot of times I don't understand this in horror, especially, but a lot of movies they bring in characters that like almost like replace the icons. Like there was a whole for a long time in Freddy vs. Jason, there was this like running thread of there's going to be this guy, uh, Damascus or something like that, who's going to be like the head of a Freddy cult, and like he was like a secondary
Yeah.
antagonist. And it's like even thought about that. Like it's just on paper, I'm like, so you're replacing. You have a movie called Freddy vs. Jason, and you're gonna replace Freddy versus Jason with this Damascus. Like, what are you doing? Like, you this is the kind of thing where you set them up and let them go.
So the other funny thing about that, to your point, is that them even opening the door to that uh potential rabbit hole of a Freddy cult just starts giving you Halloween 6 vibes and the Thorn cult stuff.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
never went anywhere either. So it's really fascinating to me that anyone would even like
Consider
play with
that.
that as an idea because it just didn't work, you know?
Right. And yet here we are, years later, repeating mistakes. So what do we get in Halloween Ends? We got a character
Mhm.
like introduced that like throws Michael to the side. You're like, you're here in Michael's last film, and you're going to spend the first half talking about this guy Corey. Like, man,
I still contend that Halloween Ends should have been the first movie.
hundred
Corey should have
percent.
been in the entire trilogy.
100%. It makes a lot it work it actually works that way. It's
Yeah.
like it's like you put when you have a new trilogy like that, you serve Corey up as the opening act. He's like he warms up the audience before you get to the main event of Michael coming
Yeah.
back. It's a nice little tease.
Because
It's like
I
you
could have
want
gotten
Michael.
on board. Yeah.
100%.
And I could have 100% been on board with a fake Michael walking around for a little bit until actual Michael shows up and takes over. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, that's kind of, again, talking about this movie, we go from Friday Part 5, where they pretty much ignore all of that happening
Oh yeah.
going into, well, Jason's just going to be back and we're just going to do it as it is.
Right. The
So
point
it's
where
just
like
one
they
of
actually
those.
had to put forth Jason Lives as the title just to go, hey audience, this is Jason. This is really Jason.
Right.
We fucked up the last one. This is Jason. This is not Roy. This is Jason.
Yeah. Before we get too much farther into the episode and the movie, I think we would be remiss if we did not bring up that over the past weekend, pop culture was shaken to its very core. The death of Matthew Perry was a sudden and shocking event that I think a lot of us were not anticipating. It happened this past Saturday, uh, and it's just kind of been a tragic, sad, heartbreaking event that really you could feel the ripples really actually affecting everyone around you. Even if you didn't love Friends, there's been a very real sense of loss and tragedy to the entire situation. I've always been a big Friends fan, and I grew up with Chandler as a character, and I watched all of the movies that Matthew Perry was in because I always thought he was very talented. And it's been a very difficult thing to process. I don't think any of us assumed that one of them would pass away so suddenly, so early. I'm,
Right.
you know, and especially with how sad it is that, he very publicly battled a lot of his own demons and his addictions. And, we don't know what happened other than that he drowned. But there's a real sense of it's even more heartbreaking that it seems like his health has always been so wobbly because of all of it, and it may have finally caught up with him. And it's been really hard. It's been really tragic to see how it's affected everyone, but it's also been heartwarming seeing how it's affecting people too. And it was not lost on me yesterday that when the cast members of Friends put their statement out, they did it together. None of them did a separate post about him or anything at the time. They did it the way they did everything else in life as a cast because they had become a family. When they would go to negotiations for salaries, they wanted to be paid the same thing together, so they all went into it together. Like, no one ever left that core six to be the standout of the others. They took care of each other, and they were a real family. And
Right.
it sucks,
So,
man. It sucks bad.
absolutely. It's kind of one of the most telling quotes I had, though. We talked about his public struggles with addictions and things of that nature, and previous health scares. I remember they had the like 10 years ago. He had the battle with like, his like, colon exploded because of like some opiate
Oh,
abuse
that
or
was just
whatever.
like 4 years ago,
Or
5
4
years
years
ago.
ago? 5 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't know time at this point, it's all sorts of weird. But no, like, and I remember a quote from him that I read after he passed that really kinda, like, put things into measure for me. He was like Matthew Perry himself said that, like, "If I died, it would be shocking but not surprising."
Yeah.
And I think that's the one of the best way, or it might have been maybe the way where it's surprising, not I don't either way. It was shocking, but it was in a way like sadly not surprising because of his public struggles. I felt awful thinking that. Everybody it just it feel I feel awful that something like this happened to somebody and anybody at all. Not even the fact that it's a celebrity or anything else, but like obviously he was such a talented guy. Obviously he touched so many people, and yet here we are. He struggles like the rest of us. He struggles massively in some areas. He had legitimate social things that came out that he was. I mean, just it always felt like something was going on with him, and you always felt like he was struggling just to live. And he made such great strides in some ways as well. So hearing this guy just feels like it's the guy you were rooting for. You were rooting for this guy to make it. Then something tragic happens, and you don't really know how to move forward, like in a weird way, because like he just the Friends, like again, like to your point, Friends has obviously seen some backlash now. I mean, some things are
Yeah.
revisited, and it's like things of its time, yada yada yada. But no matter what you think of the show, it's an iconic show, and it made such a mark on our pop culture that it felt like it was immortal. It felt like they were immortal, like they were always going to be that
Exactly.
cornerstone. And now all of a sudden, it's like when you watch the reunion years later, yeah, they're all older now. Yeah, maybe Matt LeBlanc doesn't look quite the same as Joey did back in the day. It's like they're all old.
God, it's almost like people age. I can't fucking believe
Right.
it.
Exactly. It's all that kind of thing. And like, public was made about how even then Matthew Perry looked a little haggard and everything else. I felt bad about that because it's like you can't let our heroes age, and it's awful. But it just, you always remember in your memory, you see them back on the show and what they were. They are there forever in amber as that, as what they
Yeah.
were. And here we are, like one of them
The
is now gone.
saddest, yeah, and I think the saddest thing with that too, to your point with the reunion in a lot of ways, other than people being so shitty about how that so many of them looked because they had aged. I mean, look,
Yeah.
it had been 20 years since the show had ended by
Right.
that point. Like,
Right.
guys, fucking perspective, number one.
Seriously.
Was that he's even talked about, like, he had lost so many of his memories
Yeah.
from his drug addiction and things like that when they were making the show. And you even see it when they're talking about it and he goes, wait, that happened, or like, I don't remember this, and him being like, okay, well, I'm gonna go cry again now. Like, you don't realize how hard it was for him, and yet at the same time, like, he's so lucky that they were all still there and they all took care of each other because they really helped him, I
Yeah.
think, through so much of it. And I think, we need to remind people, like, he really put his money where his mouth was. He opened rehab centers and
Mm.
was trying to help people who were struggling like he was to get clean
Yeah.
and to get back on their feet and to, be better, because if he could fall into this the same way that anyone else could, like, and he has the means to do it, then why shouldn't he help? And I think that more than anything shows a commitment to people and who he was and his character of, I am not bigger than people around me. And it was interesting because I saw this quote. It was someone who had worked, it was one of the writers who had worked on The Odd Couple with him.
Mm.
The TV version that he
Yep.
did with Thomas Lennon, and they were reworking the pilot, and the writer had said that he and Matthew were talking. He goes, Matthew asked him, he goes, what do you do when you can't write and you need to get out of your head and you need to, like, go do something so that you can get back on track? And the guy said, well, I just get up and I go take a walk around the neighborhood and just go and walk. And Matthew was like, yeah,
Can't do
I
that.
can't do that. And the
Right.
writer had that realization of how hard it must be for someone like Matthew Perry to
Get away
just
from it all.
want to go get away,
Yeah.
because the moment you walk outside as Matthew Perry, you're Matthew Perry. Everyone wants to talk to you because you're Matthew Perry.
Right.
And the bummer is, man, like, I think he was a lot more like you and I, a little bit more introverted, a little more wanted to keep to himself at times. He was a lot more human than I think people gave him credit for, or understood, rather.
I honestly want to throw out the fact. I mean, this is not like an original thought of mine. It's been banded down about, but like you think of someone like him, someone like a Robin Williams, people like that, like the funny people in our lives, the comedians, the comedic actors in our time. Unlike any other actor, they're always expected to be on. Like when you walk out as Matthew Perry and you meet somebody, they want you to be Chandler. They want you to have the snarky comeback. And I gotta tell you, being on is one of the toughest things. You can't be on 24/7. You can't
No.
be that snarky. Like Chandler, like Matthew Perry, I'm sure was. I personally, I've never met him, obviously, but like, is he a funny guy? Probably. He also had a team of writers behind him, and it's not like he wasn't like. You don't have a team of writers in life to make those snarky comments, and sometimes you just don't want to be funny. You just want to
Yeah.
live. You just want to walk around and get a coffee and like not have to be Chandler or not to be like the funny
Right.
snarky guy. And you'll find a lot of times comedians specifically always struggle with their mental health because, quite frankly, a lot of times, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I've heard this a couple of times. They've turned to comedy because they want to be accepted. Like
Right.
they want to making people laugh was their way of being accepted. But then it like becomes this never-ending battle of always having to be the funny guy. Chris Farley was someone who always had to be the funny guy because he thought he needed to do that to make friends, to be friends and everything else.
Yeah.
So that makes it even that's a tougher thing to think. I mean, like Tom Cruise has to be Tom Cruise when he goes out, but he's not like his Tom Cruise is just he can be stoic and he can be just kind of calm and
Yeah.
everything else. It's a different kind of thing. So I feel bad that he kind of just he had to disappear to get away from it, to turn off, and that's tiring to have to be on all the time.
Yeah, I
So
can't even imagine having to, and I mean, you and I have been in positions where you do have to do stuff like that. It's really
yeah,
difficult. Ever since I kinda took a step back from the space, it's helped me considerably. I don't feel like I need to be on all the time, which
no,
is a nice change of pace of actually being myself.
yeah,
Um, and really, I don't know, it's a struggle sometimes to just be yourself.
yeah. Oh yeah,
So I
absolutely.
can't imagine being someone who can't just be themselves when they walk out of the house. Um, and it's a thing that none of us really like, very few people will know what that feels
Right, 100%. And
like. Yeah,
I hope you don't have to feel that way. Almost you shouldn't have to.
yeah.
Nobody should have to in a way. But like it is something that is a part of celebrity, especially. It's a part of it's just like the price you pay in a way. And people are like, oh, well, it's nice. They have millions of dollars. It's worth, you can only money does help, obviously, but like it doesn't solve everything.
Money doesn't solve everything.
Right. I mean,
You
you can
know,
build a bigger prison for yourself in a way. Sometimes that's what ends up happening.
I was, uh I was a little sad too, like, thinking about it. I always wish that he had ended up being a little more prolific as a character actor.
Mm,
He showed incredible range very frequently, especially after Friends. He did a lot of dramedies and or appearing in shows like The Good Wife
hmm,
or West Wing. I mean,
hmm.
and then obviously he led Studio 60, and that's kind of where I was going. Is I really wish he had gotten to do more with Sorkin.
Yeah.
Um, he
Yeah.
he was one of those guys that made Sorkin dialogue really sing.
Yeah.
He and Jeff Daniels really are two of those guys that you just see them do the Sorkin dialogue, and you're like, yes, like yes, 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 you get what you're doing. And I know that Sorkin dialogue is not for everyone, and Sorkin's writing is not for everyone, but I've always liked that. And I mean, he was in that the Kennedys show where he
Yep.
played Ted
Yeah.
Kennedy, and he was actually very good in that too. Like
Yeah.
the dude had range.
Yeah.
People just didn't always get to see it.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I really enjoyed his turn on Studio 60 as
Mhm.
well. And I thought that was I mean, because the character kind of felt close to home to him.
Yeah,
So I really felt I kind of got inside his head a little bit with that show. Unfortunately, I know it only lasted like 20, 21 episodes or something like that.
20 episodes, I
Um,
think. Yeah,
yeah, but he was good. He was great in that as well. And that was a different kind of thing. He got a chance to shine to a degree. And I think he really did. Unfortunately, it didn't obviously click with everybody. But that was another great there was definitely some greatness of range there, even though he's playing himself. He kind of like the ability to play a character who has demons and struggles that are the same as your own. That's really a raw thing to do. That's really a raw thing to do in front of the world, and he did it and handled it with great aplomb. I thought. I really wish that series had continued, to be honest, as well.
me
Um,
too. I always consider that one of the great losses of that era
yeah,
of television because it only lasted a season, and I think it really would have and
it was
should have
finding
lasted
itself.
longer. Well, the
It's fine.
bummer was is that right around the same time, both because they were both on NBC, but 30 Rock came
Mhm.
on right around the same time, and they basically made the choice between 30 Rock and Studio 60. 30 Rock was pulling in way more viewers and had
Yeah,
a much hotter cast if you were looking at it with at the
right,
time Tina Fey coming off of
uh,
SNL, Alec Baldwin, Tracy Morgan coming off of SNL,
right.
like Jankowski. You had this hotter than hot cast, and it was like, well, you got to go with that one,
Right,
and
and
it
I
cost
understand that
nothing.
business-wise, it made sense. It made sense to
Yeah,
do it, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but you're losing something here. You're really losing something here.
yeah. So I felt like we had to at least touch on. It would be
No,
impossible to not. We do a pop culture podcast, really.
right.
Like we spend so much time talking about other things on here that are not just the movies that we talk about. That if we didn't bring up Matthew Perry, it would feel weird. And it's not like he did any horror movies or TV shows or anything, but he was just a talent. He was just a
Absolutely,
massive talent.
absolutely, it was a massive talent, and, it's a shame that it ended the way it did, but we salute you, and I hope, you found some peace now, and we'll always have that loss, but we'll always have his stuff to go back to also. You can always watch Friends, like, I know you said you're rewatching Friends with The Miz. Um,
Yes. Yes,
and
I am.
that's the thing.
We
So
were like 10 or 11 episodes in when it broke. And it was so watching it last night, we watched a handful of episodes and it was like, man, he was from season 1 on, like he was just he got it. He was the
right.
guy. He's so good. Um God, it's just so enjoyable and it's been fun. She's seen it, but she's never seen it all the way through. Like she's seen bits and pieces. So it's interesting watching someone experience it for the first time.
Well, I'm doing my rewatch of Scrubs. I already started, so I'm getting closer to
You're
the
gonna get to
Matthew
the
Perry
Murray.
episode
Yeah, I was gonna
episode
say.
of Scrubs as well.
Well, that's also
Uh,
the episode that features his dad, which is very cool too. Like they did a couple of things together in their careers, so it was cool that they worked together, and that is there for us to all enjoy.
Absolutely, 100%. Um, now, spending a little bit away before we get into Friday the 13th, one last thing we should talk about, really brief, in brief sense, so we don't have to get into it too bit. The strikes are ongoing, obviously, for
Uh-huh.
SAG-AFTRA. They are making their way. Uh, they feel like they're starting to head towards a proper conclusion, although there's definitely feels like there's a lot of bumps still to kind of get over. It feels kind of strange. There's times I feel like it's going to be over today. There's times I feel like it's not going to be over until somewhere during the new year. Uh,
Yeah.
but we definitely support the strikes here. Like as we're talking through, hope that the studios will, of course, figure out that they need to pay their people right and do the right thing. Um, Although I know we had this conversation off air that I'm feeling a little more optimistic than you are. Maybe it's because I really want it to happen, I'm trying to will it to happen. Um, but what are your thoughts going to that at this point?
I'm of the mind that I just want them to take their time. I would rather that they get everything ironed out and they actually, you know, get the deal they deserve and people get paid correctly and the use of AI and all of that is honed in a certain way that makes sense so that we
Yeah,
aren't, using people's likeness a way that people don't feel comfortable with or whatever else. And I look at it now as this strike has already been gone ongoing for so long that I just think that people should relax and not put out there that things are sealed and done until it's sealed and done. Don't
yeah,
force the hand because
yeah,
at the end of the day, the deal just needs to be the deal. They need to get what they deserve, and I support them striking as long as they have to. And
agreed.
you know that the Motion Picture Association is getting nervous because they're going into the holidays. Like people know that once Thanksgiving rolls around, Hollywood's basically shut down for a month and a half.
Yeah, they want to get through at this point. And I gotta say, I to your point about people who are maybe jumping the gun and trying to get that in there. That adds to the fatigue that's been set in. Like the public, I agree. I want them. I want the student. I want SAG-AFTRA to stand strong and get what they deserve. But there's that public perception you have to fight as well. And sometimes when people come out and say it's done and then it's not done, there's a side of the public which is like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, get it done already!" And like that pushes things in the wrong direction because all of a sudden you lose goodwill, or SAG starts feeling like they are losing goodwill. They might sacrifice things that they shouldn't have to sacrifice, and it's not a good thing. Um, so I agree. I hope people that it's kind of like maybe just let's just shut up about it, let it work, let it's done, let SAG-AFTRA make their statements when they like nobody else except for SAG-AFTRA and AMCP. They can do their own thing as well. They should be able to discuss what they are going. If they want to say this is going on, this is where we are. That's fine, but listen to what they're saying and don't try to jump the gun and try to read between the lines. At least publicly. If you want to do it privately, that's fine. That's up to you. I can't stop you doing it in your own head. But publicly, I think it does more damage, and we got to stop that to a degree. But the strikes are still ongoing. I should share to get off to a more positive note. I'll share this here. We both got the same text yesterday
Oh yeah.
for our man Winston Marshall for the big thing, and throwdown competitor and all that stuff. Had the Blaggy Sword, wonderful guy, one of my favorite people in the space. He's a good-hearted dude, good fun dude. Just text me, I don't know where he goes, and I just met Ed Harris on the picket line. I'm like,
Oh, it was the best. I feel so loved when we hear things like that from people.
yeah, there's a certain brand we have, or and we do, and we cultivate for ourselves to a degree. And I don't mean that in any kind of like malicious way. Like we don't like it's not fake. but it is who we are. We have our loves. We're very out and proud about who we love and who we talk about all the time and everything else. So we kind of create that space. People think of Bruce Campbell, they think of PJ Campbell. When people think of Ed Harris now, they
or the
think of
Rocketeer.
PLD. Or the Rocketeer. PLD, they think about it at Harris, they think about PLD or Queen. So it's nice to be remembered. And good for Winston. I'm happy you got to meet the man briefly. I guess he tried a nice little fist bump and fight the power kind of situation. You have to move on. But I did love that. Great positive note for the day. And thanks, Winston, for thinking of me. So
also one other side note, coda to all this, if you will. There's a new Doctor Who spinoff that drops starting tomorrow over on iPlayer in Britain. We are not getting it in America, which is questionable in this. We're in a day and age where none of this makes sense. In the same way that if Disney Plus and HBO Max are not in other countries, what are we doing? Like, we all share the internet. You're just asking people to pirate, but we are, alas, getting a new Doctor Who spinoff called Tales from the TARDIS. It's a 6-episode miniseries featuring the 6th, 7th, 8th Doctor, a bunch of the different companions from over the years, and it looks fantastic. And I can't wait to see the story and how it unfolds.
Are they all dropping tomorrow, or just the first episode dropping? Are they doing like a weekly thing?
I think it's just the first episode. At least that was the way I read it. But
what's weird to me about the whole Doctor Who thing, we're going to tell. I don't want to get. We're going to have Doctor Who episodes later on, I'm sure, when everything comes out. We're just not able to stop ourselves. But I do feel like it feels like Marvel back in the day. Marvel, excuse me, sold off their characters and their rights like parcel by parcel, and they paid for it. They're still paying it for it. They still don't have complete rights to Spider-Man, for example, that kind of thing. It feels like with classic Who and New Who and Doctor Who kind of did the same thing. I feel like it would be great if we could have gotten all back for the 60th. There's still some deals that have to be made here and there. I kind of feel like eventually the game plan is to bring everything under the right banner. And maybe then Disney Plus will get everything at that point, especially hopefully if it does well. If Doctor Who tanks on Disney Plus, then they're not going to worry about getting it. And that would be a shame. But if it does well enough, then Disney will hopefully eventually acquire licenses and we'll get everything as well. It is a shame that we have to go through this and not celebrate this all together. It's amazing to me that it still happens now in this day and age as well. God, I hate rights. I hate that these rights can mess things up like this. But
it's so, again, in a day and age where we can literally do anything and we are all connected this way, this is just an insane thing.
And the worst part about it is like in a day in this age also too, it's not only that it's not happening, but the information is not coming quick enough. We should have the answers to a lot of these questions by now. Like, for example, we just found out like a week ago, maybe, if that, like that the specials were going to be the 25th, 2nd, and 9th or whatever. Like, we didn't know that. Like, it was October 25th, and we're like, yeah, it's in November sometime. How do you not, like,
we all knew it was coming, but still,
like, we knew it was coming, but like, it's like you don't have your day set. Like, for our 6th anniversary, you'd have that like in March. It's going to happen here. We're all going to celebrate. Bah, 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 bah. And it's like, what are we doing as far as that goes? And then and speaking of information, I just found out, and not through any real official source. I read somebody contacted a source at Disney Plus, and according to them, Disney Plus has the rights right now. They're going to drop the 3 new specials, and then the next series, like everything going forward. Like, they're not going to have any of the back catalog on Disney Plus for a while. That's from what I've heard from people. Somebody confirming that, but Disney Plus hasn't said that. Nobody has said that officially. It's been like through back channels, and maybe it might be the case of they didn't want to like admit that and go, well, yeah, it's the home of Doctor Who, kinda. It's the new home of Doctor Who, but it's like, really, I don't understand. I don't get it. But so there's some status going on
for sure.
So the business side of Doctor Who stinks. That's what I'm going to say. That like, I'm looking forward to the RTD era and everything he's doing and everything else, and hopefully getting to see everything. But I don't even know if like. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name, like Doctor Who Confidential or whatever. Is that the name of it?
Yeah,
behind the scenes thing.
Yeah, so that was the original. It's got a new name, but Doctor Who Confidential. It's just a continuation of that,
right? And I hope we're getting that. I don't know if we're getting that on Disney Plus at this point. Are we getting what are we doing here? We should be able to celebrate everything together. But if we have to be Jack Sparrow, we have to be Jack Sparrow, I guess. Because I want my content. I want to be able to see. I should, as an American Doctor Who fan, and I'm not saying this as an American, like Americans are right, but as anything, as an American Doctor Who fan, I should be able to see the Doctor Who content, and that's anybody in the world. Anybody who doesn't get that content that's in the UK, and as a Mexican, as a South American, anybody. If you're a Doctor Who fan wherever you live, you should be able to get the content that's coming out as Doctor Who. It just makes no sense to me.
Yeah,
especially with the ideas that he's thrown out there about what we're getting from RTD. Like we spent how many times talking about like, oh, I'm like, PJ, calm down. You're hyping yourself up too much. We're not going to get all this content we're talking about. But
yeah,
but even then, like, I want to be able to get what we get.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those, like, again, we've talked about it too, and this kind of goes into even sports and things, but we live in a world where baseball can be blacked out depending on where you live.
Right.
And you're trying to watch certain games, even if you're paying for the MLB pass, and then it blacks it out. It's like, I'm sorry, I paid for the thing,
right,
and I can't access the thing. Why am I not able to watch the thing, even though it's clearly airing somewhere?
Right. Yeah. All has to do with rights issues of the thing. It's like they have these exclusive contracts and stuff, and it's like, yeah,
it's 2023, guys.
Pay licenses.
It's 2023.
Right?
Let's not do this anymore. But Tales from the TARDIS sounds cool at least, and I'll say this on top of it: Once in Future officially ended the initial 7-episode run. We're not getting the Coda episode till next November, like November 2024. So the initial Once in Future storyline that Big Finish did for the 60th has ended, and cheers to them. It ended up being an excellent love letter to all things Doctor Who. What a great final episode with a lot of great surprises along the way. It really felt like a proper love letter.
Absolutely. I hope the 60th also feels that way. I will say the rest of the specials it is coming out November 25th. That's the first one. I've heard some things already, a little bit, no spoilers, but what makes sense is I want to throw it out there for all Doctor Who fans or casual fans or somebody who might be interested in finally checking in. From what I've heard, the first one is good, but it's definitely kind of a training wheels kind of episode to a degree, like kind of because it's a new era. It's a new level. It's a completely new era, completely new chapter. This is actually probably in a way a good starting jumping in point to a degree. From what I've heard, there's definitely some training wheels to get you caught up, as well as being a love letter. And the second and third episodes of the specials are supposedly wild and fun, and I can't wait for those as well. So a lot of things to talk about with that.
David Tennant said that episodes 2 and 3 are Russell completely unleashed. I remember if I remember correctly the words. So I'm very excited to see exactly what that means, because I have so many thoughts of where it's going and what it's going to be, and I can't wait to see what it is. But we've spent almost 50 minutes talking about not
everything else,
the thing that everyone apparently came here to listen to today. So, let's get into it. We're going to get in our way back machine, as it were. Well, ironically enough, the way back machine is bigger on the inside and looks like a police phone box from the 60s. But, here we are. It's now the summer of 1986, and we are talking Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives Friday the 13th, Part 6, however you want to say the title. I've heard it both ways, as Sean would say, and Gus, I've heard it both ways. Sean and Gus and Psych in the best show. Love Psych. They're Tuesday. What is it? Tuesday the 12th or whatever. One of the best shows of episodes that's a love letter to Friday the 13th of all time. If you've never seen that episode, Sean Astin is in it, if I'm remembering correctly. Or not Sean Astin. Is it Sean Astin in that one? There's someone in it that is recognizable that I'm trying to remember. It may be the dude who played Foggy in Daredevil.
Eldon Henson
TV show. Yes, I have to look now, but I digress. Anyway, following Friday the 13th, Part 5. I'm a little over-caffeinated now. Sorry, guys. Second cup of coffee of the day. Coming off Friday the 13th, Part 5, the reception was not great. It made less money than all the previous movies to that point, and they knew that they needed to get back on track to make a film that was more in the vein of the thing that people like the franchise being, meaning we need Jason back, you dumb motherfuckers. So
that's basically the
all got together
clarion cry.
Let's do it. Let's get Jason back here. And then they got a gentleman named Tom McLaughlin who started his work as a mime. Not joking, he was a professional mime, which is just the coolest story ever. This gentleman named Tom McLaughlin came in, and he really wasn't that interested, funny enough,
Right.
to make a movie in the Friday the 13th franchise. But he decided, screw it, I'll play along. And what we get is a beautifully meta, hysterically funny, very fun entry of the Friday the 13th franchise, featuring not one, not two, but three absolute banger songs from Alice Cooper, the best characters in the franchise, the best dialogue in the franchise. Boy, everything about this movie is an absolute win, and it is an atrocity, not an actual atrocity. Bad word to use right now when actual atrocities are happening across the world. Let me roll that back. We're gonna say that it's massively disappointing that this movie underperformed as bad as it did coming off of Friday Part 5.
I gotta say, we talked about a little bit about this before we started recording, but it feels that I don't know if there's any way that this film does be successful after 5. It's due to like the backlash from 5 was such that the best performance that this film could do is what it did, and that's underperform at the box office, but find a whole new life in VHS rentals, etc. At the time, VHS rentals, because it has turned now into one of the most beloved of the franchise. People talk about this. It's almost always with reverence. It's almost always in like you do rankings, like we do. I could do. It's always going to be towards the top of the list, if not people's favorite of all time. And when people say that, I don't know. I'm still kind of going through it. There's a couple that I might have over it, one or two I might have over it. But when people say this is their favorite one, I'm like, yeah, totally get it, totally understand. And it comes down to Tom McLaughlin having this idea. Tom McLaughlin had done one previous horror film, I believe it was, and he kind of like to your point, he said, "Is like, you know what? I don't know if I want to touch this tired franchise, which is definitely in the bottom of the barrel." But he had this idea, like maybe we can do this, and it definitely worked in the better. And the way I could say it best is professionalism. It just felt like a professional movie, and that's what we both talk about. Crystal Lake Memories, the documentary set that's on Friday the 13th. It's a wonderful documentary. Yes, right there. We watch. I tend to. We both watch it after the episode. We watch the segment on the film, and everybody to a degree, to a point, will just say that how professional the set was, how professional Tom was, and how almost easy this film was to make in comparison to some of the others that other horror stories. Man, I mean, it's never easy to make, but the set was a very friendly, fun set, and everybody had a great time overall. Except for the one producer who was trying to penny pinch. Yeah. That was some funny stories in there. But yeah, it comes off on screen because Friday the 13th Part 5 had its moments, but you kind of felt a little icky about it at times. Like, well, I don't know if that's because you know some of the background, but like it just feels a little weird. This one feels fun and positive.
I think also part of the problem with 5, it feels gross in a lot of ways and very exploitive. Like they said, they were trying to make a grindhouse movie. That was what the filmmaker was going for.
Right.
And that's fine. The problem is that it never fully wants to commit to anything.
Right.
It never commits to a tone fully. It never commits to any of its ideas fully. It's a little frustrating. Right. It's why you can look at it the way I told you. Like, there's an argument to be made that it's all just a hallucination.
100%. Oh, and quite frankly, that's what this film basically says it is. At least the ending. At least the ending is completely knocked off. I mean, it doesn't completely wipe it out. I mean, it doesn't do the. I think in a good way, it doesn't completely wreck on everything, like officially, but it implies it. I guess the best way to do it, because there's probably, I mean, maybe there aren't, I don't know, maybe there's some diehard fans of Friday the 13th Part 5. You don't want to alienate those fans necessarily, but you kind of give them the escape clause. If you didn't like the last one, we can kind of pretend it didn't happen. We can kind of pretend it didn't happen. Don't worry about it. I think that's a good thing to do. You kind of imply it, let fans come to their own decision. Let fans making their headcanon is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all.
No, absolutely not. But one of the things I love about this one is out the gate, this movie absolutely knows exactly what it was going to be, what it was going for. Tom McLaughlin decided to make a Universal monster gothic horror film.
Yeah,
featuring Jason that is also very comedic. And that is exactly what this movie is. It is a movie that is in on the joke of, We know that you wanted Jason back, so we're gonna bring Jason back, but we're gonna make it a Universal monster movie. We're gonna make him an unstoppable force. We're gonna make
Right.
him a Universal monster. This movie really should have just been shot in black and white, and to
Almost,
really
yeah.
like, yeah, like really just to make it all feel like it comes together. Because even down to Manfredini's score, you listen to it and it sounds exactly
Gothic.
like those like gothic horror films.
I
This
mean,
movie is so just oozing and dripping with that Universal monster feel, and it makes me so happy.
well, definitely. I know you're a big Universal Monsters fan, more so than I am. I enjoy them, I respect them, but you love them, and that's great. So I totally
You're damn
understand why
right I
this
do,
is
motherfucker.
absolutely. It's fine. I'm not saying anything bad against them. It's you love them more than I do. That's all.
I know.
Um,
Oh, I know.
but to your point, I want to actually bring up the fact that Manfredini's score does sound like that, and it absolutely does. But he also does the great job of make it's a combo score. It's not like he totally forgets the Friday the 13th. It still sounds like a Friday the 13th score. It's almost like a remix of the Friday the 13th
Yeah.
score done with a gothic way, which is the best way to handle it. I agree completely about the whole thing set up. We have the cold open. I'll get to a second, but I'm going to bring up one thing that happens at the end of the cold open that shows exactly what this film is, and that's of course the famous James Bond moment, where at the end of
Yes.
the open, end of like the kind of cold open of the film, we get that look in his eye, and we get to see Jason walk in, parodying a James Bond film, walking in, turning, and it sets up exactly this what this film is, and we need to let you know this is not your mother's Jason. Come along
Yeah.
with us and have a good time with us. Without ever being disrespectful to the franchise. That's the thing. It's like it kind of walks this great fine line. It's a
No,
tough line
totally.
to cross, but they do it well.
It's so funny because I actually think, for all intents and purposes, the last 3 films in the initial Paramount franchise, this movie, 7 and 8, they form a very interesting trilogy amongst themselves of movies that finally just start having fun
Right.
with the concept instead of needlessly trying to be more serious about it
Right.
and taking it seriously. Like, now, granted, 7 and 8 are not nearly as meta, but they
Right.
have a camp factor still. I mean, the next movie might as well just be Carrie versus Jason. Like,
Which is what
you
they
know,
basically pitched
spoiler
as.
alert
Yeah.
for where we're going with this, but the next one is basically Carrie versus Jason. They start to get weird and wild. That movie being you know, being a love letter to a lot of the psychological things that have been going on in like the Stephen King years of horror and
Well, let me
those
also
movies that
interject real
Brian De Palma is doing.
let me interject real quick, and I'll let you continue your point. The funny thing is, bringing our conversation back to what we talked about in the beginning of the episode. This is how far back the idea of Freddy versus Jason was toiled with. Was
Right.
because that's what the original plan for Friday 7 was. Like, when we can do that. When that didn't work out at the time, that's when they brought in the other horror icon, not really Carrie, but basically Carrie, or also Jason versus the X-Men to a degree. That's another
Yeah.
way they looked at it as well. Please continue. I just want to throw that out as a
Oh,
connection.
no, exactly. It's so funny because you look at it and they start to really embrace kind of well, we made Jason an unstoppable killer and a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have some
Mm-hmm.
fun with it. And I really think that Tom McLaughlin had such a handle on the franchise. And what's interesting is that in hindsight, because you and I are big fans of the Never Hike Alone films that Womp
Mm-hmm.
Stomp has done, we've brought them up here a few times, and we will be covering Never Hike Alone 1 and 2. We're gonna do the ghost cut of the first one, so that includes Never Hike in the Snow.
Right.
So that's why I'm calling it 1 and 2. We're just treating it that way.
Right.
They've released it that way, so kudos to
Enough for
them.
us.
But those 2 films are direct sequels to
Two
this
six.
film and continued to prove why we all like Tommy Jarvis as a character. And I think that this film in particular really reminds me why Tommy Jarvis has become so beloved in
Right.
the intervening years, as far as final boys are concerned, or final men, or final whatever you want to call them in horror. And I do think that comes down to Tom Matthews. This actually feels like the proper continuation of Tommy Jarvis from Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I absolutely agree. John
comparative
Shepard
to the last one.
5. I don't want to knock him at all. Like we talked about it during our episode, he definitely had his own take on this, what he was going for. He was obviously a little bit of a different movie than everybody else was, to a
Yes.
degree. But I am glad that he didn't come back. He was like talked about coming back for this one. That's what they considered him at first, and then he went another direction. And I think that was best for both sides. I think he did fine in 5. I'm not going to knock him, but this definitely felt more like Tommy Jarvis from 4. And not only that, it also felt like the Tommy Jarvis that was much more in tone for this film. Like John Shepard's Tommy Jarvis does not fit this film, even worse than his film in A New Beginning. So I agree with you completely. And I agree with you completely about Tommy Jarvis as a whole. Losing Tommy Jarvis in the franchise for the next couple kind of makes the franchise lose a step or whatever. I completely understand why they don't use Tommy Jarvis in 7. Because if you're going to do the Jason versus Carrie thing, that's your angle. You don't need Tommy Jarvis in that. But I almost feel like they should have gone back to Tommy for part 8 to a degree. They could have found a way to bring him involved somehow.
Similarly, honestly, I kind of look back at Freddy versus Jason in a weird light in that, where there's an argument to be made that he really should be in the movie, in some capacity.
Right. Now, a lot of them, they should have been in the movies. Like, that should have been a culmination of, like, they did, in some ways, they made it a great culmination of both the Friday mythology and the Nightmare mythology. It's pieces of both. Maybe a 90+ minute movie would falter if you try to bring back all of the other people, but it felt like there was a place for Tommy Jarvis. Just like it was a place for maybe Alice from Nightmare kind of thing. Like you could have made some of those work out and had those kind of moments with them. But they didn't, and we never see Tommy again. And that seems like a mistake considering how this film ended. It almost sets up Jason versus Tommy as this like big thing. And I think Never Hike Alone understands that and shows us what we could have gotten.
It's funny to your point too. Like Freddy versus Jason, they had written dialogue about him that eventually gets cut from the movie.
Right.
But then Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, they did a second comic afterwards, like a second 6-part series, and that was the New Warriors or whatever, like the Nightmare Warriors, I think is what they call them. And Tommy is a part of that group as well, because that's when they start to bring everything together. But it's just funny, like you would have thought in Freddy versus Jason, him appearing in some capacity just almost makes sense because he survived. He's a survivor. He should probably be, talked to in the situation for what's happening. And apparently he was like running for mayor or something, and they cut that out of the movie. He was supposed to be running for mayor of Crystal Lake.
That's funny.
But I love this character. It would have been great. And I love Tom Matthews as the character specifically. And this movie does a thing that you and I have been talking about a lot, back and forth, is that I actually really appreciate that this movie in particular, and also the Never Hike movies to a point, they stop being focused on just teenagers.
Right.
And they start to put actual adult characters into meaningful positions, not just like one-off kill type things. Part 5 starts to do it a little bit, but this one kind of puts a lot of adult characters into the situation, and it starts to actually feel like a real threat, and you start to have some more interesting dichotomy in how things are there when you're looking at Sheriff Garris, when you're looking at Rick Cologne, when you're looking at the caretaker and all these different characters. And to that point, that's why they were originally going to introduce Jason's dad at the end of this movie. That was initially never shot. It's in the novelization and the storyboards were done, but that was where they were going. Which I think Friday Part 7 would have been way different.
I want to talk about that. I don't know if we can talk about it. Maybe we'll talk about it.
Just do it now.
Sure, we're not talking about now. I was gonna save it till the end because that's the big thing they were talking about at the end. But I love the concept of having Jason's father in there because we know all about Jason's mother. But we never even think about his father until and I know we wouldn't have if I probably wouldn't have for the longest time. But that was originally the idea that they had for the ending. And I saw, if you watch the Crystal Lake Memories doc, they actually show you the storyboard of it. And I kind of that would have been amazing. And actually, in a way, this is one of the reasons I brought up the Mancuso doing well, but not always doing the right thing. Like he said, quite frankly, he's like, I love the idea. I didn't think it set up what we need to do with what we need to do with 7. That's why we changed it to a degree, because then you're kind of stuck in your own place. You'd have, if you ended it that way, you'd have to have continued in that. There's no way you could drop that and not explore it later on. And of course, we're left with the idea this did kind of happen in Halloween to a degree.
Right.
We had a similar situation. It wasn't Michael's father, but we had that character that was dropped in the beginning of the film in like 5, and he's throughout. The Man in Black and is there throughout, and then they had to continue it in 6, and 6 had no idea how to continue it, and we got what we got. Ended up screwing the pooch, to be honest with you. So it'd be interesting to see if Friday the 13th would have fallen into the same like disparity. You have Tom and Glock introducing the character, having this idea, and then having somebody else pitch 7, and then it's something different and screwed up. I don't know, but I would love to have seen at least in the alternate universe in which it happened, and give it a shot, to be honest. And this is coming from someone who Friday 7 is one of the nostalgia-wise. That was the first Friday film I ever saw. I have a lot of love in my heart for Jason versus Carrie, but I, as a fan of the franchise now, I would be really interested to see how that would have gone differently.
Yeah, it's so funny too because here we talk about all the time. Maybe we don't need to open up the can of worms of do we need to learn about their pasts and things like that. And yet this was one of those I actually would have been very interested just because Pamela is so built into the franchise of being the original killer and all of that. And so, right. So Elias being a character, because that was his name, and he has since shown up in like off media comics and things like that. Because apparently, did you know there was a Jason versus Leatherface comic in the 90s?
No, I did not.
Yeah, there was a 3-part miniseries, and Elias was in it. Pamela ends up murdering him. It's a thing. I've never read it. I've read the like information of it since, but I did not know that it was even a thing until much later in life. Topps Comics made it. So I digress.
You know what? I do remember that now. Like I kind of blanked it from my memory, but now that you mentioned, I kind of remember seeing the cover. I remember seeing it in the comic store. I never got it because when I was first starting into comics, I didn't want to venture out of the Marvel or DC realm. Like
a lot of us didn't. Like we kind of,
Much I loved horror. I wasn't a horror comics guy. I was like, I want to see this stuff on the big screen. I don't want to, I was dumb at the time, honestly speaking. But that's what it was. We're just different tastes at the time. That's kind of funny. I kind of vaguely remember the first one. I think I remember the iconic thing. Like I remember correctly now, it had Jason like almost holding Leatherface up, and I was like, it's kind of a interesting. Oh, very. I didn't know Elias was in that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So they've toyed with it since. Obviously, like they were going to bring him into the reboot at one point that they did in 2009, and that didn't happen. Then they were going to do another one, and he was going to be in that. Like they've toyed with the Elias of it all for so long, but ultimately, as much as I also would have loved to see it, it was probably the right move. Yeah. Because if Tom McLaughlin doesn't come back and follow up the story he is setting up, you are setting yourself up for failure. And it's the funny thing of you and I have talked about this in the past. The Friday franchise and the Halloween franchise, they overlap a lot and end up stealing, whether intentionally or not, each other's ideas. And so the fact that the Man in Black is a very similar Elias thing that ends up existing within that franchise is fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what's funny? I just looked up. I kind of like glanced through. I looked up Elias Voorhees and some of the appearances, and he's on the Friday the 13th wiki. And he did appear. Obviously, we mentioned it in this whole Jason versus Leatherface thing, but he also appeared. One of the next things he appeared in was a comic called Friday the 13th, Pamela's Tale. And you know who wrote that? Mark Andreyko.
No shit.
Our Schmodown friend, Mark Andreyko, wrote a 2-issue comic book miniseries called Friday the 13th, Pamela's Tale.
Somehow I totally missed that. That is awesome. Good for Mark. I need to find that.
I have to definitely got to find it off. So contact him and talk to him about. We could have him on the show, maybe talk about it at some point. Who knows? Because we love Friday the 13th. Yeah, wouldn't hate that at all. We do a quick interview or something. That'd be really cool. So I'm interested to see where he goes, where Elias Voorhees goes, and a couple different things. Maybe it's a great place for him to appear. Would be the Crystal Lake TV series or something to that effect. Maybe I don't know.
I'm a little worried that that may not happen now.
You are.
With the Brian Fuller of everything. Uh, with the allegations that came out about him recently.
Oh, I missed that, unfortunately.
I apparently a lot of people did. It happened very. It hasn't seemed to get a lot of traction, but there was some allegations against Brian Fuller that came out, and
Uh,
I'm a little worried that it may stall that project out. Not that he shouldn't be held accountable if it's true, but more that
of course, yeah.
this is a franchise that has had so many ups and downs and problems to get off the ground that any bump like that could easily be seen as screw it, just dump it.
Yeah.
So
Disappointing. Disappointing on so many levels. Both
yeah,
personally with Brian Fuller and you know what? I shouldn't say either because like we don't know this. I don't know the details on the truth. I don't want to just automatically say whatever happened, but like obviously it's sticking around, and that's unfortunate that it's going through this no matter what happened. If it is true, then he has to be held accountable. Absolutely has to be held accountable for his actions. But also, you know, from a horror standpoint as well, fan standpoint, it's disappointing that this would possibly go away because of it. It's very sad on all
yeah.
sorts of levels.
But I wouldn't be
Obviously,
shocked. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I would say obviously the personal side is more important than the TV side of things as well. But you know, losing
Oh,
TV side of things
yeah,
would hurt as well.
absolutely.
But
That's why I wanted to make sure that my amendment on that was it's not disappointing that it would go away if it was all true. It would just be
right,
disappointing that it derailed it in the anything can really kill something like this.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
but at the same time, if this has to fall by the wayside because something has happened,
Then
I
let it be.
also
Yeah,
then let it be.
no.
I do think because it's A24, if I'm remembering correctly, who's also
Mm.
involved. I don't see them shelving it right away either, but there is a part of me that wonders if, because do you pay off? I don't want to get into it. Anyway,
No. All I have to
that's neither here
say
nor
is that
there.
it's got to happen. Something's got to happen because you have Friday the 13th, hasn't seen anything since 2009, and Nightmare on Elm Street hasn't seen anything since 2010. And what are we doing 13, 14 years later? Like these are cash. You can make money off these franchises still. Might not be like blockbuster money that you're used to. You put a low budget in, you can make this work. This is obviously a land of IP, recognizable IP. Stuff should be done with them. Get the rights worked out, figure out something. Do a TV show, don't do a TV show, do a movie, do something. Get something done. You're missing out on money. I don't understand how this is not viable for like I don't how can you overlook these franchises and not do something with them at this point?
Honestly, man, it is wild to me that this franchise continues to be this dead.
So
Like,
that and
here
Nightmare.
we are talking about Jason Lives, and yet Jason ain't living too much. And thank God, once again, Never Hike Alone being in existence has been such a treat because it feels like people really get it and really want to do something with it. And it was so funny because I actually saw someone was talking about the guy who made the Terrifier films really wants to remake Friday the 13th. And I have so little interest in that as
Mm,
a concept because I'm not I don't really like Terrifier.
they're fine.
It is not my style of horror,
Yeah.
and I don't want Jason to become that. To me, they are very different types of slashers. So I have
I
very little interest in that.
I don't disagree with you. I want to take one step back, put forth a caveat. Just because the guy made the Terrifier film doesn't mean he can make the Jason films the same way. So if he has an idea, maybe it could work. You never know. But I completely understand your hesitance and your feelings of the matter because I also would not want to see that kind of Jason as well. Um, I'd watch it. I'd definitely give it a shot because that's who I am. I love the franchise enough to be a fan that I would absolutely give it a shot. But I too don't really want to see my own edges. I wouldn't want to see that as well. I think there's plenty of other people who would give it. It would be a better choice for the franchise for sure.
I mean, again, I think the Womp Stomp people wouldn't be the worst people. And it was interesting because I was reading some of their comments about what they would do if they got the money. And they were like, honestly, we would even consider doing like a full proper version of Never Hike Alone, like basically readapt it as
Right,
a movie.
right. With
And
a
I was
bigger
like,
budget and
God,
everything else.
yeah, like imagine that. That'd
Yeah.
be something. So looking at this movie, though, in particular, like getting us back on track with the Jason Voorhees of it all.
Yeah.
I love that this movie decides to open with, you know what, screw it. We're going to go the Frankenstein route. He's going to get hit by lightning because Tommy just can't leave well enough alone. And he grabs a metal iron rod in the middle of a lightning storm with his little Igor style friend, if you will.
Horseshack.
Yeah.
From Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah. Alan Hawes, the late, great Ron Palilio. And I love this. I love this opening because, again, it tells you everything you need to know about the movie. And then, again, to your point, the aforementioned, Jason doing the James Bond opening, it's all perfect. Yeah. It works. It's great. And this movie is frequently this way. It sings all the time because it's always breaking the fourth. Like, they have a character who breaks the fourth wall quite legitimately and jokes about the fact that people find this entertaining.
Right, absolutely. This film wastes no time. That's one of the best parts about the film. It's a lean machine, Jason. It's not even 90 minutes. But it knows it's not 90 minutes. It knows it doesn't have a lot of time to waste on anything else. There is no recap at all. We have a cold open. And the funny thing is, like, I remember my second note is a little bit like, what the fuck is the game plan here, Tommy? Like, what are you doing, Tommy? Tommy's actually, honestly speaking, like, and essentially, he is the villain of this film to a degree, in many shapes or form. But I love the fact it's like, it is a I don't give a fuck return at this point. Tom McLaughlin, the whole thing about Jason, the entire franchise, like 2, 3, and 4, especially by the time he gets to 4, is like, this guy's got to be supernatural. Look what he survived in 2, then he survives it in 3, and here we are at 4. He has that thing. If he's going to come back, we are surrendering to this. All right, you've got to be supernatural at this point. There's no way around it. So here we are. We're going to go, you know what? Let's make him full-on supernatural. We see his like maggot-infested, decayed body come down, and also the lightning comes down.
Hey, maggot head.
Maggot head, right? Maggot head.
That's my favorite.
He's super Jason at this point. It kind of comes back on the ground. Not quite a super Jason and Jason X, but he's still a super zombie Jason at this point. And here we are. It wastes no time setting this up. And you're like, you know what? All right. It goes so fast that you're kind of like, you don't have time to go, wait, what's going on here? What the hell? You're like, all right, I'm on board the road. Exactly. It doesn't give you time to think. Let you go. Okay, I'm in. Let's do it.
And one of the things I love so much about this movie too is, we're talking about it, but like the dialogue is so fun and so oddly crisp. Like, how many times have you and I done the like, anywhere the red dot goes, yeah, bang. Like it's so cheesy. What do you got? I've got a whole enchilada. Like all these lines of dialogue that are just so cheesy and wonderful and good and weird, and the characters all kind of weirdly stand out. Like the weirdly sexist dude in the paintball tournament who's like, she should have stayed in the kitchen. Like, women don't belong out here, just to get his arm ripped off by Jason. There is so much just wonderful weirdness to this movie.
Yeah.
Tom McLaughlin is just on the wavelength of, I want to have fun. Right. And we're going to make this fun. And the movie is going to know that it's fun. And we're going to point at it so that when the critics watch it, they can't be nearly as hard on it, because how can you be hard on a movie that's being hard on itself and already making fun of itself?
Absolutely. It's a great way to put it. It doesn't, and it goes, like I said, it goes in that whole I don't give a fuck moment. I mean, the fact is, I love the fact that Tommy puts all his gasoline on him after he comes out of the grave, starts the match, and what happens? A sudden thunderstorm. We had the thunder and lightning, and how the rain just like just goes down. Like automatically, it's like, really, this is gonna happen now? All right, I'm on board. Let's do it. But I love the next part after the credit sequence and everything else. Again, it sets up Tommy. The next thing we see is Tommy at the police station. And I gotta say, it's kind of a brilliant setup, because the way Tommy comes in, and the police are usually considered usually in these slasher movies, they're a little bit bumbling. They don't listen to the characters, and the whole time you're like, listen to the kids. They're telling you what's going on. Oh my God, Jason's back. But the way Tommy goes in, guns blazing, all balls to the wall, you completely understand why the sheriff's like, fuck you, kid.
Even though it's also, Tommy's fault.
Right. It's Tommy's fault and everything else, the whole thing. So it sets up the police and like this because the sheriff's actually one of my favorite characters in the story. He's a good man. He's a moral man. He is actually in any way, shape, and form. He's actually probably a real hero to the degree of the film, even if he is our little secondary antagonist because of the way Tommy is. It's a great, brilliant way to set it up. Like, so none of these characters are really annoying to a degree. It's that you believe what's going on. You believe why it's happening. And again, it sets up Tommy as a real villain to a degree because he loses it.
Yeah, it's the best. And again, I think that also comes to the Tom Matthews performance of it all.
Yeah.
If I don't believe in this Tommy being so rational and unhinged, I don't think the movie works. And I think that Tom Matthews ends up really humanizing Tommy in an interesting way because, again, he seems like a real transition from the Corey Feldman one, which is why when they initially bring Jason back, you start to hear the audio of Corey Feldman attacking Jason at the end of the movie. Right. And I love that because it feels like a proper transition more so than what you get from 5 to 4 to 5.
Yeah.
Then you realize all the pain that he has gone through and you feel for him, which is why you kind of just go, I really don't blame him for being so psychotic about all this. I really don't blame him for going off of the rails and doing all this because the pain that he has felt and everything that's happened to him, of course he's going to be like this.
100%.
And I got to say, on top of that, you put him with Jennifer Cook as this character, Megan, and Megan is a great final girl and such a great addition to this franchise. Again, I think it's actually a bummer that from here we don't get a proper continuation with them in the series as a 100%. Whole because they are so good together. They just work.
Absolutely. I'll get to Jennifer. I was gonna get Jennifer Cook in a bit when she gets introduced, but I'll take about it now. Specifically for my channel, it's very good because Jennifer Cook, of course, was introduced in.
I knew you were going to do this. I knew that there was a plug here.
Had to be. Not even a plug. So I love V. V was my favorite show of the 80s as far as sci-fi goes. And yes, plug on this channel. Myself and Lego are going to the V franchise on review. We're talking about V, the series, right now. And we talk about Jennifer Cook all the time. And it was actually Jennifer Cook's performance in V that led Tom McLaughlin to want to cast her. And I got to say, Jennifer Cook is a really talented actress. She's a very different character in V, much like V's Robert Englund is a totally different character from his Freddy Krueger. Jennifer Cook plays a character in V where she is, her character is a 2-year-old girl who basically gets amped up to be a 17-year-old girl as far as she goes through cocoon, she ages up, but she's still got the mentality of a young girl.
Yeah.
And she plays it very innocently and very good, very different from this character. This character definitely no innocent young flower, but she's very a very woman of the world, young and naive in some ways, but not to the same degree. Jennifer Cook does a great job with this character, and a character that almost I feel like in a lot of slashers would have been a very annoying character, could have been a very off-putting character. You root for her, and she does everything pretty much right. About the only time you get a little bothered by her is when she starts calling off her daddy at the camp. So, but at the same time,
which is such a weird choice. I've never, I feel like she's too smart for that at that point. I've never loved that little moment.
I agree.
But otherwise, the rest of it's great.
Especially because of how she handles the kids. Like she goes into the camp and she handles them very well. She's like, "Yep, we're going to be good. We're going to be fine. Everything else," and she handles everything else great. But what a great character she is, and I get she is definitely a good foil as the sheriff's daughter, as it were, and a great opposite of Tom Matthews. So yeah, great character, great performance. I wish we got more of her. I really do. I agree. I wish we got more of her. Maybe we still will. I keep hoping, in all these days, all the legacy sequels, we obviously saw all the characters come back in the DGG Halloween trilogy to a degree. I would love to see a legacy thing with Friday the 13th where we get a couple of those people back, maybe Amy Steele as well, Jennifer Cook, Tommy Jarvis. I mean, Tom Matthews would do it, I think, for sure. Tom Matthews really hit a pinnacle here. He's got this, and of course, Return of the Living Dead the year before. A great year to be Tom Matthews. You're to be Tom Matthews.
God, Return of the Living Dead is so good. There's one. that's a series I wouldn't mind doing eventually, even though that gets weird because there's so much off like brand
Yeah,
weirdness to
like, what do you
the
put in the franchise? What don't you put in the
right. Because I mean,
franchise?
even like Return of the Living Dead has its own
Is it
sequel that
yeah,
is that he's also in, but
yeah.
he doesn't play the same
Not the same
character.
character, right? It's so strange.
Which is so odd. And I mean, like the Living Dead franchise overall is kind of weirdly messy.
Yeah.
So, but God, I love them.
Yeah. That might be
I
something we could do. We'll have to figure it out, though.
Yeah, I just genuinely think that this movie in particular was so smart in trying to change the formula, but
Yeah,
not in the
agreed.
way that part 5 does.
Right.
Because part 5, again, its problem is that it tries to go to a formula to a previous film that really, in hindsight, is not the most interesting movie in this franchise.
Right.
When you do part 5 and you're trying to do it more like part 1 and try to do the masked killer, it's a mystery thing again, you can't really put that genie back in the bottle. You know what
No.
I'm saying? Like,
And it
and then you
evolved
don't
well
really
past
commit
that.
to it. Right.
It evolved
But
well past that.
this movie decides to buck the trend of we haven't really fully evolved it. So
Right.
let's try something different and let's make it a little more comedic and a little more accessible. And what's interesting is I was watching this last night with the miss, and we're kind of sitting there, and I keep catching out of the corner of my eye that she was watching this movie more than she's watched any of them. Like she actually was kind of gelling with some of the ways I feel like that the comedy hits and
Yeah.
the things that it's doing because it's so different. And oddly enough, it's kind of the least graphic of the movies while
Oh, yeah.
also having some of the best kills in the movies.
You know what it is, and I don't. This almost makes sound like an insult, but it's really not. It's a clean film. Like part 5
Yeah.
was a very dirty, grimy film, and it
Grindhouse.
felt almost pornographic in a way. Like this, we mentioned this last night. I always seem to forget about this. This has no nudity in it,
Hmm.
no nudity at all, and that was a stalwart of the franchise. This franchise was kills and big boobs. That's what we get in this film. So we get none of that in this film, and yet still my favorite part. Still one of my favorite films of the franchise. It's
I
done to a great demand. I think it's a great way to do it. We're going to make the exact opposite, tonally, film wise, than 5 was.
I don't know if you noticed it, but like they kind of, for better or worse, someone kind of takes a swipe at the last movie and Danny Steinman in particular. Like in the Crystal Lake Memories, they were like, we have a real director this time. Like
Yeah,
someone who actually is a real filmmaker, and you're like, ooh, ooh, like
right.
that kind of it. But at the same time, like I kind of get what they mean because Steinman was really going for the exploitive shock value grindhouse thing, and that's really not what these movies are. And
No,
so to
not at
have
all.
someone who, like, stripped that away goes back to, "Okay, let me make a basic Friday the 13th movie, but then let me strip it further and add some horror elements that people love. Let me
Yeah,
put in some of that gothic horror. Let me add in some quippy '80s dialogue," especially in the middle of, because this is 1986.
that's right.
John Hughes is getting very popular with very quippy dialogue and like big ensemble casts of teenagers that are, fun and daring and different. And this movie kind of leans in on that in a
It
weird way.
it
No one,
does.
it does. And no one explicitly, even in the making of stuff, no one explicitly is like, hey, we're definitely chasing the John Hughes of it all. But in listening to the dialogue and listening to the way the characters interact, it has that feel. Like there's that great moment. This movie has a bunch of kids in it.
Yeah,
The first Friday movie to really have kids in the movie, mind you, and these movies have all been set in a goddamn summer camp.
right. That's the
But
funny
it's
thing
the first
about it, absolutely.
right. So we finally start to see kids in the movie, and it's really interesting. In that great moment where the girl Nancy sees Jason and he like walks up to her while she's laying in the bed and he's kind of looking at her and she starts to close her eyes and pray,
Right.
she's doing the Lord's Prayer for bed.
Yeah,
And Jason's like kind of tilting his head and leaning in, and then he walks off.
right.
And I love this moment for a lot of reasons because it's exactly what we're talking about, but it also has this air of, we know Jason's a killer, but he's not a monster. He would never kill a child.
He's not going to kill a child. That was the thing. Because, like, again, yeah, you're right. They bring in the kids, and it's like, hey, wow, are they gonna kill kids? That's always been a no-no. Outside of Piranha, by the way, which I just watched recently for the first time. My God,
Oh yeah,
Joe Dante basically says "fuck them kids."
Oh yeah, dude, Joe Dante kills all the children in that movie.
It's like, wow, okay, that's what we're doing here in the 70s. Well, okay, but other than that, it's always been kind of that thing. Like, even Michael Myers, it seems like he's going to kill the kid, pretty much, except for when it comes to Jamie. But that's a different story. Not Jamie Lee Curtis, but Jamie from Halloween 4. But this was a case of, oh my God, we're going to put all these kids in danger. But Jason never really goes after him. He breaks into the room at the end again, but never does anything with it. And I think it's a good step to take. Because if you start having him do that, Jason has gotten to the point in the franchise after the 6th film where fans start rooting for him a little bit. It's the case where, like, you want to see Jason kill the teens that deserve it, because they're, I mean, not that no one really deserves getting massacred by a machete, of course, but as far as in a movie sense goes, teens act like jackasses. They do stupid stuff. You watch us kill the stupid teenagers. Yeah, that's a cathartic kind of thing you watch for horror film. That's one of the things you watch for. But in this case, they don't. And bring back to your other point regarding John Hughes. Absolutely, this is John Hughes. The teenagers are all John Hughes characters. If this wasn't a horror film with didn't killing kids, this would be a perfect setup for a John Hughes film, as far as that goes, because there are no real assholes amongst the teenagers. I mean, Court is a little, but he's not an asshole. You don't hate him for what anything he does. You're kind of like, that's Court being Court.
John Travolta's nephew, by the way. First time I really realized that. But
I didn't realize that till I had the same revelation. I'm like, oh my God, that is another Welcome Back Kotter reference in this film. I guess maybe that's Tom McLaughlin. Welcome Back Kotter.
Okay, I have to stop you real quick. Sorry, this is bringing up a thing. Have you seen the new John Travolta commercials of him as Santa Claus? But they're parodying Saturday Night Fever.
No, I have not. Oh my God.
Okay, I need you to look this up later. It's literally like they're parodying the Saturday Night Fever dance from New York, but it's John Travolta as Santa Claus.
My God.
It is it might be a thing of beauty. It might be the thing of nightmares, depending on how you want to look at it. I need you to go watch this later.
Okay.
Because it's a fascinating thing. I see it at the bar all the time because we tend to have sports and stuff on, and it's come on a lot lately.
All right, I'll take a look and see. This sounds fascinating and horrifying all at once. But yeah, okay, fine.
That man's career is just making commercials parodying his old stuff, because the other one is the T-Mobile one with him, Zach Braff, and Donald Faison, where they're parodying Grease. They're trying to get him to join T-Mobile.
Yeah, good. Yeah, John, got to make that buck, got to make that dollar. I get it.
Got to make the money.
Make the money. After Gotti, I'm impressed he still has any kind of career left.
You mean Jeff Alterman's favorite film of all time?
Favorite film of all time, yes. I name dropped that for him. Jeff's going to give me a Venmo hit soon for that. Anyway, going back to Jason Lives, of course. You mentioned the kids' camps and everything else. Let's jump to the next bit, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. You mentioned it kind of earlier, the paintball sequence. Not part of the kids' camp, but definitely in the same realm. We actually have this team of execs playing paintball. This is the first thing that was actually shot for the film with a different actor who playing Jason. Jason, who was, I guess, unceremoniously let go by the studio after daylight came in because, well, let's just say he didn't look like he had been emaciated for very long. I guess
who was it? Someone said that for someone being really dead, he looked like he'd been eating a lot of sandwiches, I believe is what someone said.
Yeah, and I hate that, being a fellow fat guy. I hate hearing that, but it is what it is. At this point, that's what for Jason's got replaced a lot. There's many films that had multiple Jasons in it, which is what makes it so easy to do. Which makes it so easy. That's why a film should always be able to be made from Jason, because you can almost put almost anyone behind the mask. Not almost anyone, but like you don't have to have a star like Robert Englund be in there. He's not making that whole case. This is one of my favorite sequences of the film, to be honest with you. This showcases what this film really is. There's a humorous side to it. There's some great kill moments in it. Unfortunately, edited down, and I found out from the documentary,
Crystal Lake Memories. Yeah.
Crystal Lake Memories. But this is one of my favorite bits. There's humor. We got the one guy, the misogynist, who gets his arm ripped off, and that's one of my favorite kills in the movie when he throws the misogynist into like
the smiley face.
The smiley face is carved in the wood. It gets all bloody. You get the female exec who takes out everybody else to their chagrin. Obviously, they're winning, but then the triple decapitation there, which I wish we got in the unedited version because it sounded really cool. And seeing a little bit of the false footage there, the footage that was there, that looked like it would have been cool. It was still pretty cool nonetheless. You don't ever get
it's still very cool. I still love it as a kill.
Right, it's one of my favorites of the whole thing. But my favorite bit is Tom McLaughlin's former mime friend. Who plays a character named Roy.
Yeah, Whitney Ryback.
Roy.
Playing Roy.
And I got to say, was it meant to be a metaphor? Was this meant to say, Roy, the whole Roy idea was pretty goddamn stupid and we're sorry. So we're going to make Roy a bumbling idiot who Jason goes down and tears apart pretty much. I feel like that was a purposeful
They never explicitly say it, but I don't think it was unintentional.
Yes, that's what I kind of feel like it was. I feel it was intentional.
Otherwise, why name him movie that's very intentional? They name drop Carpenter for John Carpenter, like
Karloff for the general store.
Karloff. There's all sorts of little nods and winks to other filmmakers and other franchises and things throughout this movie.
Yep.
Yeah, Cunningham, obviously, because the creator of the franchise. There's just so much of that throughout this movie that the Roy of it all does not feel.
When the name of the false Jason was Roy in the previous film, you're not going to name a character Roy right after that if you're not being meaningful or making a comment on it. And that Roy is a bumbling idiot. And
who is
comment was made
told very quickly.
He is, and he's funny. He's funny. I love that. That's my favorite bit when Roy shoots Jason with a paintball gun, and Jason like stops, is like, looks like, what the fuck is this? And Roy runs. And
then all he's doing is screaming that he's gonna get killed, and then what happens?
He gets killed.
The funny thing is we don't actually see him die.
Right.
We just see what happens afterwards. We see
the aftermath. And not the only time that happens, by the way.
That's what I was gonna say. What's funny is that's not the only time that happens, because that happens to one of the counselors as well. And what's interesting about that to me is I actually think that makes that kill later in the movie so much more effective. Because when you see the aftermath, it's fucking horrifying. And you're wondering what happened.
Right. A lot of that happened. A lot of that is the case. Sometimes, like I've always been a proponent for it. Sometimes your imagination is worse than anything you can put up on screen. And yeah, you have to put the good kills on screen too, because that's what horror fans go for, like special effects kind of thing. You go for to see that. But sometimes a nice left your imagination piece is like, oh, damn, what was that like? And he can do better than even Tom Savini can do, and that's a hard stretch because Tom Savini is a phenomenal person. Not that he's the master of these kind of things, and well known for the Friday franchise. But yeah, I gotta say it was definitely effective for me.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I look at this movie, and the more we talk about it, the more I think about it, the more I rewatch it. There's a reason that we speak of this one so highly as a film. And so why I think it's so beloved in hindsight, even though it did the least amount of money at the box office for its time in the franchise, it arguably gained attraction once it hit VHS and people started to really discover it, and it has gained a reputation of being such a great film because it is a movie that actively asks more of its audience than any of the movies, while also just trying to give the audience something fun. The RV kill is ridiculously fantastic because you don't see things like that in these types of movies normally.
Right. Yeah, well, that was a case. The RV kill was a case also. You mentioned it before. Something that, even though, again, it made the least money so far, the franchise, it's not the least ever. It still diminishes after this, unfortunately. But the Alice Cooper of it all.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this is like an independent film that hits it big. You get a rock star like Alice Cooper, who's like, yeah, I love Jason. I love this. Exactly up my alley. I'll make 3 songs for it. Sure.
Did you see on the if you on the Crystal Lake Memories, when it pulls him up and they have him on there and they're talking to him, it just says Alice Cooper, rock legend, like not rock star, not anything, just rock legend, and you're like, yes,
yes, he is.
And they played the Man Behind the Mask song a few times. This scene in particular, as you're about to bring up, but even at the beginning, when you first get to Camp Crystal Lake and the girls are standing there, like getting ready and they're talking, it's playing on the car radio. So here's my other question. How are all of them not noticing that there's a song about Jason Voorhees playing that they have not, no one's putting this together? Questions? I have questions.
We all have questions. Yeah, absolutely. Alice Cooper, what a legend he is. And of course, he's definitely made his mark on a couple of horror franchises. Of course, he appeared in the Nightmare series. And of course, he's also
in
Carpenter's
Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness. Which is
so,
fucking amazing. I love that movie.
I think we could do a Carpenter run and call it a franchise, even if it's not a franchise. At some point, maybe we should.
I mean, he made his Apocalypse trilogy, and it's the thing, Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. And I mean, you could make the argument of a trilogy alone.
Yeah, good. Maybe something we'll talk about. Big Carpenter fans that we both are. I know that definitely fits into it. We're not usually a director-based franchise thing, but you never know.
Did you see his interview quote last week? Because was it with Bloody Disgusting or whatever? And he was like, I don't even want to be doing this interview. Like, I just want to get high and play video games. And I was like, he's just like me. He's so real. I love John Carpenter. He doesn't want to make more movies. He wants to get stoned and play video games on his couch. He's just like us, Paul.
I know. Like us. Look, I'm a guy who has long lobbied. I would love to see Carpenter get one more go. So that The Ward is not his final film. And yeah, I know he's way past his prime in terms of caring about things. And so would it be better than The Ward, his last one? I don't know. I'd love to give him another shot. But at the same time, when I keep reading that, I'm kind of like, you know what? Let the guy ride. He does what he does. If he wants to just sit there and do nothing, then he's fucking earned it. He's earned it more than a lot of people have. So do what you do, John. Play your video games. Throw in an amazing score in occasionally. On his films.
I just love the idea of hanging out with John Carpenter and all he's doing is toking up and playing video games.
I would love to imagine like just sitting there, you're playing video games with him, you can have conversations with him about just movies in general, like picking that guy's brain and just having fun and hanging out. Like what a time that would be.
I mean, look, he also is a man of class and taste because his favorite film in the new Halloween trilogy is Halloween Kills. I've never been more vindicated in my life for my love for Halloween Kills than that.
I do. Yeah, I remember him saying that too. Like, that makes a lot of sense, man. We get that. We get you. John,
we hear you, John Carpenter.
We hear you.
John, if you would like to be on this podcast with us, I mean, you don't have to actually hang out and talk because I know you don't want to, but I would enjoy getting stoned with you and picking your brain for a little bit about
just
things.
Turn the camera on. You can play video games, and while you're here, just hang out in the background and chime up with some occasional bits of nuggets of gold, and that's all we ask for.
We love you, John Carpenter. Thank you.
Love you, John Carpenter.
If it wasn't for John Carpenter, these movies wouldn't exist because if he doesn't make Halloween, then Paramount doesn't rip it off for Friday the 13th. So you know,
absolutely. So exactly, 110%. John, we love you. We love you, John. Anyway, back to the tale that we are talking about, Friday the 13th, part 6, Jason Lives. So Tommy gets driven out of the sheriff tries to escort him.
When does that ever work in horror movies? Why do they do this every time?
I don't know. It's a good question. But of course, Tommy is not going to let that slide. And I love the line. Again, one of those kind of lines we talk about. I don't know exactly what it says, but he turns a sudden left to try to get the sheriff and the deputy to follow him to the cemetery to show him what went down. And he goes, oh, there he goes. Give him the noise and cherries.
Oh, yeah. It's like give him the noise and cherries or whatever it is. And you're like, incredible. The dialogue in this is amazing.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And then he goes obviously to the cemetery, and lo and behold,
I was going to say, by the way, not just someone. Also, the last movie tells us, hey, he doesn't really have a grave. His body was burned alive and cremated.
Ashes.
There's no Jason left. And yet this movie is like, hey, about that?
Obviously not. Somebody got the wrong information. The mayor was told something by a flunky who was wrong, and not good. Yeah, we do have
We've all
the caretaker. Absolutely. It's funny. We didn't actually. We kind of mentioned it briefly, but that's what the caretaker. We did see a scene where the caretaker covered the grave the night before because he didn't want to get called a bad caretaker, and that's where he does have that iconic fourth wall break. Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
Oh my
Wink,
God,
wink, and nudge, nudge. Yep.
That's just my favorite. I love that they're willing to do that. And that's what makes this movie stand out. And it's why Kevin Williamson was so affected by this movie with Scream. Like, you can
100%.
see why Scream exists because of this movie's humor and what it's saying and what it's doing.
Absolutely. So the next time we see him, he goes back and the grave is covered up. So it looks like that Tommy's lying. So it's again an effective thing. But again, a great edit, a great transition here. I mean, like, he goes back, Tommy yells at him, like, you gotta dig him up. And he leaves, and the guy who's an alcoholic, or he just throws back a drink. He's like, dig him up. Does he think I'm a fart head? Cuts the kids.
Yeah! All the kids. Yeah. Also, can we talk about, they let the caretaker dude have this whole line of dialogue too, where he's like, I graduated high school. I earned this job. And like, he really cares about being a caretaker, apparently. Like,
Absolutely.
I love his commitment, man. Good for him.
Absolutely. And of course, we did learn that initially in the initial ending, he would have been in that scene with Eliza Voorhees. But that never meant to be because he was an added death later on for the rest of the thing. But what a great small role. I don't remember the actor's name, but he adds a lot to this movie for sure. Good performance in a small role.
I love this character. And again, this movie's populated with just fun characters. That we haven't even talked about it. There's that great couple kill earlier in the movie when they're driving down the street and they
Tony
again
Goldwyn.
talk about that. Yeah, Tony Goldwyn. Again, we talk about it, but and Nancy McLaughlin.
Nancy McLaughlin.
Yeah, the director's wife. But they have this whole thing about, they see Jason and they're like, she goes, I don't want to go down that way. When has that ever worked in a horror movie, to go towards the thing that you don't want to go toward? Like that, their whole kill, everything about that is fantastic.
Oh, and then
she almost got hurt making that.
I heard that. Yeah, because she actually almost got impaled. It's actually one of my favorite. Another one of those great snappy lines. I love that one because Tony Goldwyn says, "Just drive at him; he'll get out of the way," and he doesn't. He's like, "We'll scare him, get out of the way." Stop and deadpan from Nancy McLaughlin. Yeah, that really scared the shit out of him.
Also, I love when Tony Goldwyn gets speared, and then Jason just tosses him behind him. He's just like, speared, toss. Next. Cool, great, we're done.
Again, of course, that's when he impales the windshield and almost impales Nancy, who also had to lay submerged in mud with the regulator. Oh, that was kind of a intense moment as well. Yeah. But yeah, great funny moment there as well. Again, all the deaths are handled with like a little bit of humor. So it adds to the level of the film at this point.
Well, I do like the fake out there too. That's one of the few fake outs in this franchise that works incredibly well. Not like there's not a lot of them in the franchise. There's not a lot of the fake outs to get to those moments, but this one in particular works so well because it does ask you in a moment, you go, wait, is he really going to let her go? And is this Jason different? Only for him to hop over her and stab down. But it works. It's very effective.
Absolutely. And I love the visual image of like the American Express card. She's trying to give him money, thinking that he wants money or something. And the American Express card that floats away on the top of the mud. So good. Okay. Speaking of humorous death, though, we're jumping back forward, the caretaker's death. Another fun moment where he's walking through, starts talking about the thing in his own head, throws the bottle back, expecting to crash.
And here's nothing.
And they turn around, Jason catches it. You're like, it's just stupid. It's stupid, silly.
It's so dumb, but it works. That's the thing. It's so humorous, and it's another one of those great kills. Like the alcoholism didn't kill him, but maybe it did actually. Like there's a weird. This franchise, once again, in the way that we talked about in the beginning, whether meant to or not, has always kind of been like weirdly social commentary on a way that you may not expect. And that's another one of those. Alcohol is bad because look what happens. if you're an alcoholic, you're gonna die. And you're
right,
like,
right.
yes, what? But like he's murdered by the bottle.
Right.
Like quite literally murdered by the bottle, not because he's drinking it, but also because he's drinking it. Is this movie saying that drinking is bad?
It might be. It just
You know what
might
I'm
be.
saying? Like you start to wonder because this movie franchise as a whole has kind of had that reputation in hindsight of, the virgin always lives. The
Right.
kids that are fornicating are the ones who are going to die because being
Right.
horny is bad.
Yep. Which it's funny because there's actually members of the franchise that will deny that was ever intended. Um,
Exactly.
and I believe them. I don't think they probably wasn't meant to be intended. It was kind of one of those pedigree things where like the star of the movie or the leading of the movie is the one that doesn't do anything that way because they have other things to do in the movie, whereas the secondary characters have to have something to do before they get killed by the bad guy. And well, in an R-rated horror film, some sex is a good seller, so that's probably what partially happens. But speaking of sex and death, that's the next death. We have the random inserted kill. This is the case of when you learn from the documentary, this wasn't intended. This was like the studio wanting more of a body count.
Yeah.
So they throw an extra random pair. What are they doing in the middle of the woods? Like they're having a picnic? Are they like not even camping there? It's kind of a random. I kind of feel like this is one of the slapdash moment. It felt like a slapdash moment. Like they're sitting there having a picnic at night in the middle of the woods, and it felt like like what are you doing here, dude? What's the story here? What's the day like? I want to go to the middle of the dark woods and sit down there and have some like it just makes no sense. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter. You're there to get another. Well, it's not the first in the franchise, as the actress points out in the Crystal Lake Memories, but the 2-for-1 shish kebab deal. The first on a motor scooter.
And you know what? As a callback, this one works.
100%. We both mentioned like specifically how annoyed we were with the through the bed or through the for the third time. It kind of didn't because it got a little overly much. This does work as a callback because exactly for what you mean. It's done humorously. It's all winking like a wink and a nudge. This is who we are. This is a thrown together one. I approved of that one.
Yeah, and I think it's also because it is a change of pace. It is a like different version of the kill, and I think it makes it kind of fun. But I also think it's just the way that those characters are, even for like a half second. You're like, oh, they're really fun characters, and they're killed off just as quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So even a thrown together sequence just works for the film. That's how much of a lucky draw Tommy McLaughlin was. He makes it work. He makes it work. What a good moment. What a good moment. All right, so let's jump forward now. We kind of mentioned a few times before Court and the RV. Court and the RV. What a funny sequence there. Obviously, Court has gone away from the camp to meet up with some girl he knows in the area, I guess, who has an RV. It's all like it's kind of like
it's her uncle's RV though.
Her uncle's RV or stepfather's RV, whatever it is. Yeah. But it all kind of like has a lot of like little pieces of inflation. Like, okay, interesting. That's an interesting way to put things. We have our one real sex sequence of the episode or the film, but it's very chaste. She has all her clothes on. And funnily enough, in the documentary, the actress says like they actually they asked her to go topless at one point with the contract or all signed. She's like, nope, not gonna do that. It's like, all right, well, we won't go farther then. So it's pretty much a chaste sex scene as far as we're concerned. But it's a fun one because I love the fact you start seeing the RV rocking.
Yeah, and Jason tilts his head.
It's like,
he's like, what's going on in there?
Jason is such a child sometimes in his own mind still, even though he's grown up, he's like still kind of has that childish thing about him. He doesn't know what's going on. What a fun moment that is, though. One of my favorite.
You gotta wonder, man, if Jason just got laid once, would he really be killing everyone?
That's a good question. I don't know. But there's some humorous moments, of course. Also, she's like, during the sex scene, she's like, "You only got to last to the end of the song.
10 more minutes. Yeah, 10 more minutes. I think
he's like, what? 10 more minutes song? Song in the 80s, 10 minutes. What pop song like that is everything. It's funny. Alice Cooper would talk about this as well. Like he wrote the song 3 different ways. Like there was like a heavy metal version, there's a rock version, and then he got into like a more 80s vibe because it made sense because the mid 80s at this point, it's the Madonna pop of it all. That's kind of the famous thing. So Alice Cooper gets his own rock version of that. So I don't know. It's fun. That's a fun
I
version.
love this
So,
song. That is a song I listen to a lot,
yeah.
but it's so fun. And again, it just totally fits the movie. And you see why they did it. Because Cooper at that time is peak Alice Cooper. So you of course you
Yeah.
want to lean in on that with this franchise. And god damn, does it just kind of add to all the effect of why the movie works. Because they even find ways to put the music in, like I don't know. It really works, man. It's so good.
Yeah, it is really, really super. Of course, so Jason kills the power of the RV, ripping the cord in half, or whatever it is. They discover it and decide to drive away, of course. And it was so weird because, like, it's such a like, who would have done this? There's no animal that really would have done this. They're like, all right, let's get out of here. And it seems as a rocking thing, they're rocking the moment. And Jason has gotten into the RV while they were checking it out. And I love the fact that he's driving the RV. Jason jumps out of the bathroom and he doesn't see it. Grabs the girl, puts her into the bathroom of the RV with him. And what happens? It has a thing like we're like, well, how is he not hearing this? And he turns up the music and tries to rock it hard. It's a great fun sequence watching him rock and roll to it while Jason slaughters the girl in the bathroom. Of course, before coming up and get that great kill where he's like sees him like, oh, he's got his head up. Sure enough, that's it. And then we get a crash of the RV, a big crash of the RV, because Jason don't give a fuck. You don't give a fuck about these accidents. And he's like, I just got to kill somebody. That's what it is. Triumphant moment for Jason getting out of the RV, like standing tall amongst the wreckage. Great shot that was. Actually, like that as a poster, to be honest.
Well, especially with the fire underneath it and stuff, it works so damn well. And
Mm-hmm,
it just
mm-hmm,
makes me so happy. Um,
mm-hmm.
and also, I mean, we have to take in the fact that this is a pretty big stunt for a movie like this.
Yeah.
Again, especially this franchise. This franchise really hasn't done this type of thing to this point.
No, no, not at all. It's always been the cheapest budgeted ways of killing. It's all been Tom Savini's special effects for a kill. This is actually a actual stunt. You never would have
Yeah,
gotten this anywhere else before. It makes sense though. That's here. I like it quite a bit. So
I love it. I think it really works, and it just kind of adds an air of scope to the
yeah,
movie. And I
yep,
actually think the fact that this one was all shot in Georgia and like on location and done the way that it was, this actually feels like the biggest film in the franchise to this point, mind you. Like the way that it's
yeah,
put together, the way it feels, all of it actually has so much location and so much happening, I feel like, and so many characters that it really stands out for that. And here you're doing this big stunt that you can only do once, in the same way that, like all the rest of these movies, you only get one shot at all these. So you
right,
gotta hope for the best that it's actually gonna land.
right, absolutely. No, and to your point, I think you're absolutely right. I think four final chapter was kind of the closest that felt like a big movie,
Yeah.
and these films started out as like again, I don't want to denigrate student films, but they're almost like student films. Like the first film is so low budget and so
Mhm.
like they're hiding things, they're making just trying to stretch that dollar, and it's like it almost doesn't feel like a real movie per se. It kind of feels like a
At
whatever.
times, no.
All right, and 2 and 3 aren't much better. 2, 3, 4 kind of took that step forward. It felt like a real solid movie. 5 was a letdown and kind of tried to. I don't know if it probably had the budget, not looking at it directly, but it tried to ape that first movie feel. It failed, I think. But then you're right. The 6 comes along and it's like, this is what we can do. We can make this a real movie with the budget we've had and make it work. It feels like a genuine movie. Probably this is the first time in the franchise, like you said, maybe 4. I give 4 some credit to feeling that way as well, but not to the degree that 6 does. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I think we even talked about it when when we talked about 4 in particular. You can really see, because they were treating it as the final chapter,
right,
that they were really going to make it feel like it had earned its spot of
right.
being the first Friday movie to have a budget, and it works and it looks great. I mean, I talked about that a lot in the
Yeah,
podcast of how good it
yep,
looked. But I think this one, because of how they handled it, it's not even that it looks better than it. It looks bigger than it.
yeah,
And that's the difference. This one feels like it has so many locations because you have the different, the cemetery, you have the police department, you have the camp, you have so many things going on in all these different spots. And even though it's all woods still, it feels grander. because you get this feeling that there's actually a town in people. And like the one thing that these movies have never, that you kind of see it in the first two, there is clearly a town near Crystal Lake, but you never really fully feel like you experience it until this one. I don't know how else to explain it.
No, I don't disagree. I kind of feel like one of the things that helped it out was the paintball sequence in a way, because it was like, I know we've had day for Jason during the day, and deaths in the day, but they tried to like hide them a little bit. This was point blank having Jason in the daylight with characters that don't feel like they're raw kid actors. So like they feel like genuine actors in a film. Um,
and that's
and
part of rapport again,
yeah,
right? As we kind of talked about.
Right, absolutely. So I think 6 definitely takes the best of 4 and makes it work as a continuation of the franchise 100%.
Yeah.
So
I'm just so fascinated. Like, again, every time we talk about this movie and these movies in particular, how much this franchise kind of evolves in a way that, like, I love the Halloween franchise. You can go back and listen to all our old podcasts about it. Eventually, I think we're going to put the audio on here on YouTube because we've talked about that. We know that all of our old podcasts aren't here because some of them were, it was all audio only in the beginning.
yeah,
So a lot of that stuff is not on YouTube. It's on Spotify and wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can find it. But one of the things we talked about a lot in that franchise is like, as it evolved, it never fully changed. And what was interesting there is that you stayed in Haddonfield. You were never really leaving. And even though you would change where it was shooting, you were always in Haddonfield. It never felt like it fully got bigger or evolved or did different things in the same way until, honestly, H2O. It takes H2O to like push it in a different direction away from that. And
absolutely.
That's 7 movies in.
Yeah. We do got to get that. I do have to figure out how to put that on, get the audio form and put it up.
Yeah.
Put it on
but
there.
Again, I mean, we can put put a Spotify link or something down below to link back to some of the old channels and stuff. That way, if people want to find it, at least it's there. Because I've tried to go back and find our old podcast, and I always go to YouTube first because I get so used to looking it up now on here.
Yeah, that's fair. That's absolutely fair.
One of those things.
I'll make that a project going forward. I'll get that on here.
You doing a project on PLD projects? How weird!
Amazing.
So weird.
I sometimes forget that it's not on here because we've been doing it like for quite a while now as a video podcast now. I kind of forget that we started off that way. So yeah, that's
to be honest. No, it's fine. It was just funny because I was like, did we delete these? And I went, oh wait, we just didn't have them on video.
Right.
Because we didn't. We never recorded his video back in the day.
Right. I did start that.
That was actually my insistence. Originally, I didn't want us to do video. Not because I don't like being on video, but I was like, well, if we're just podcasting, like what's
the point?
The point.
But now it becomes this great thing about between us. I think it's been better video wise as well because you get to see us doing it. But I understand your point as well.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I did have
and I know I'm not the only one. I know the missus watches just because she thinks I'm handsome. So
or she's watching because I'm handsome. That too. I mean, come on now.
I mean, it's fair.
Anyway, all right. So we go ahead. Jason heads his way to camp after the RV death, while Megan goes back to the sheriff's station to talk to Tommy. Megan has this very crush. She's a crush on Tommy, right? I think she's attractive, even though Tommy's the bad boy. It's like some case of girls fall in love with the bad boy that the father doesn't want them to. Sure enough, that's what happens in a way.
Yeah.
Partially because she likes to definitely tweak her dad's buttons, so to speak. But yeah, after Tommy leaves and he calls the station again, which of course, I don't know what Tommy's even thinking. Like Tommy, he gets kicked out and he's told never to come back or else they'll arrest him or whatever. Or he'll wear his balls earrings. I think he said something like that.
Yeah.
So what happens? Tommy calls the sheriff's department with no new information. Just all of a sudden, I got to talk to your dad about it. You tried it 7 times already, Tommy. You're not going to get through to him.
Tommy doesn't quite listen.
He's
a teenage boy.
Yeah, that's true. But Megan does answer the call because, of course, the sheriff is out investigating some of the
She's a
deaths and everything
Ghostbuster?
else. Yeah, she should have been. She could have been a great
She could've been.
Ghostbuster. Uh,
It's so weird to me, she doesn't really act after this movie either.
no.
Jennifer Cook just stops acting.
Yeah, and I think from what if I remember correctly, it was more of like a case of like it was a personal choice. Like not that she didn't
Yeah.
like acting, but she like just had a family and to change careers and stuff. But it's a shame because I think she could have had a long, cool careers in that in acting. Definitely.
Yeah, I
She
know
still
that
looks
even
great in the Crystal
in
Lake
that
doc. She's
doc,
still, yeah,
I
she looks
think
like she
if
could be a
I'm
star
remembering
now.
correctly too, they even talked about it in, that Womp Stomp wanted to bring her back, and they just couldn't because I know that Megan was originally in, one of the scripts,
Oh, let's
uh,
see. I don't remember
and
that
they
one.
were actually gonna do something with that, and that just didn't come to pass, and they didn't wanna recast it, so they just moved on from it.
That's probably a smart decision, but I also definitely, if Jennifer Cook didn't want to act in studio films, it'd be hard pressed to get her back into like a fan film. What is essentially a fan film to a degree. So I kind of understand that that's not I wasn't ever going to
Oh,
happen.
absolutely.
Um,
And I that's
uh,
not a dig at Womp Stomp either
Not
for
at
bringing
all, not at all.
because for being a fan film, quote unquote,
Quote unquote.
they're
They're
doing
phenomenal.
they're
Great work.
incredible. They're doing better work than most
I agree.
studio horror films.
Yeah, 100%. Um, but it'll be interesting to see if there was a legacy sequel, whether she would come back for a true studio Friday the 13th. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I think they should try get her to come back. Who knows? She came back for Crystal Lake Docs, so maybe that's something that she would consider at some point. Who knows?
That's the
Um,
thing I really like about that doc. Not to go totally wildly off tangent, but I love the ones who come back and you can see like there's a real reverence for the
yeah,
people who have been involved in this franchise that come back to talk about it. And I felt like, especially in the part 6 part of the doc, in revisiting it, the thing I really took away from it is how proud of this movie everyone is. Like
yeah.
they really loved working on this movie. They really liked making this movie, and that's the actors. It's Tom McLaughlin, like Frank,
The
Frank Mancuso
studio.
Jr. Like
Uh,
they all do. They all seemed so proud of it, and that's such
yeah.
a nice feeling.
It feels like an accomplishment. Absolutely. It feels like an accomplishment for everybody involved, and good for them. Good for them. It's something to be said about having pride in your work and getting, and you can't really say that about a lot of horror films to a degree. A
No,
lot of horror films are made slapdash or made the cheapest level. It's kind of like they did it to do it. And sometimes you get a little bit of looking back and, oh, that was a fun time, I guess. But at the same time, but like this was legitimately like a almost 100% unanimous feel of this was a good movie. This was a fun time. So
yeah,
good for them. A real family, as they said, as Jennifer Cook actually said. They said they actually really legitimately felt like a family together, having a good time.
no. I'm
With
sorry. Vin Diesel coined the term family, from what I
Oh,
understand. It couldn't have
he's
been Megan
trademarked
Cook.
it. I have to.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
I probably owe Vin Diesel some money now for saying that.
yeah. It's I
Fair
don't
enough.
have friends. I have family.
Anyway, so Megan answers the call as the Ghostbuster answers Tommy's call and goes to get him, knowing that she could help him out because she believes in what he's saying. She, for whatever reason, she buys into it. It's a little one of those things where, like, logistically, you're like, oh, that's probably not a good idea. The way Tommy came off, you're like, that's not a good idea, Megan. Like, he is a little crazy. Like, I don't know, without knowing what we know as the omniscient audience, so to speak. Like it's like, oh, what are you doing there, Megan? If it wasn't for Tom, it wasn't Tommy, it would be someone else who actually legitimately was crazy, and you're going to go for it. I don't know if it's the right thing to
Yeah.
do, but it worked for the story, so we get past it. I got to say, there's a funny part here, which is like there is an innocence about Friday the 13th movies, and I kind of meant to bring this up before we kind of veered away from it. There's like, even though I talked before about how a lot of them had, there's a lot of boobs, a lot of sex, a lot of drinking and drugs and slashing and everything else, but there is still kind of like the Kevin Smith innocence of it. Like in terms of like, they do a lot of like naughty, dirty stuff, but it's done in such an innocent, like childish way. Um, that's hard to explain. You have to watch it to understand, but it's what Friday the 13th Part 5 doesn't do right. Whereas Friday the 13th Part 5 feels dirty and naughty and everything else.
Yes.
But there's a joke in here which I don't even know was completely intended or whatever. I'm going to throw it out there. And if it's me being a sick bastard, it is. But I love the fact that, like, So Jennifer Cook is driving Tommy around, or Megan's driving Tommy around, sees the cop, or she's her father at the roadblock. All of a sudden, like, oh my, there's a roadblock. Get down.
By the way, the speeding sign where it just says question mark speeding kills me every time.
What? I love it. I love it. There's a lot of little signs and stuff throughout here that if you look at the background, there's a lot of entertainment to be had by looking at the background and stuff, for sure. Meaningfully put in there. So they see the roadblock, get down. He like goes down and on her lap. Obviously, it's a joke used in a lot of franchise and everything else. But there it is. He has got an eye. They do the camera shot of his eyes right on her crotch. Like it's right on her crotch. He does it. And then 2 seconds later, he's like, this is going to be a hairy turn.
Oh, that's 100% intentional.
Right? Okay, good. I'm not just a sick bastard who made it that way. All right. It was a funny moment. That's the kind of
it's a great, it's the 100%
joke.
Yeah, like that joke is great because it's leaning in on what the franchise is known for without being intentionally gross about it.
Right. 5 making that joke would have had her have a dress on with no underwear on, and we probably would have seen it, and then like would have been like, okay, you're on the button of this. But this was kind of like a well done, innocent way to do that joke and make it funny, but still fit in that cartoonish world that we're in this episode, in this installment of the franchise.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I really appreciate, honestly, as weird as it sounds, you and I were talking about it. Like, this is kind of the sterile version of Friday the 13th in some capacity, if you will. But at the same time, it never feels like it because of the jokes like this, because of the way that so much of the kill shots are done, how much of the aftermath of so much of what we see looks like. It never feels as sanitized as it actually is, considering how cut up it got by the MPAA later.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned
and I'm super impressed about it.
Yeah. Even some of the kills feel sanitized. There's not a lot of like, I mentioned that the bloody face that the misogynist gets thrown to. A lot of the kills are pretty simple and straightforward. You don't get like the spearing he does in the motor scooter. There's not a whole lot to that. You don't get a lot of gore out of that. There's not a lot of gore. There's a lot more aftermath stuff than anything else. I mean, I think the worst looking death of the film, the one that makes you go, ooh, compared to some of the other ones, it's probably the sheriff's death. With the back
because he's
bent in half, and done very well in a way. Like even that was edited down to a degree. But yet it is kind of
that's so funny because to that point too, that's the one kill that they try to replicate in some capacity later in Freddy versus Jason, done without having to hinder itself.
Right, absolutely. But let me actually, this is the time I want to use now for this one specifically. I love the sheriff overall as a character. Wonderful actor, wonderful performance. He means well. He never comes off as in most horror movies, he is the bumbling guy you yell at the screen for. In this case, you understand all of his motivations. All his motivations are clear. You completely can't.
You don't have to agree.
You don't agree because we know, because you're the omniscient audience, that you know that if he's wrong, you know that Tommy's right. But if you look at it from his perspective, you can really go, I might do the same thing. I might even see the same thing at this point. I don't buy it. Is he a little slow at times to come into it until they find out that Tommy was with Megan during one of the kills? Sure. But even then, he doesn't let Tommy go because he's still kind of like, well, maybe she's lying. Maybe he's lying. Let's just keep Tommy here. Let's figure this out. I want to make sure we know what we got here. I don't want to, he's got the responsibility. If he has any doubts in his mind that Tommy's the one that might be behind this, he's got to keep him locked up, right? He's got to do that at this point. But then he has a heroic ending to a degree. He sees Jason, shoots Jason. After Jason crushes the head of his deputy, and he gets caught up in his chase in the woods, and he runs away from Jason, but he's trying to kind of draw him away from the camp with the kids. But he has the heroic moment once he hears her calling for daddy. He's like, I'm not going to let that stand. Even though I'm going to die, I'm going to go tackle Jason and try to take care of business here. And of course, he gets his ultimate death sequence, which is probably, like I said, if I had to call it out here, we usually do it at the end of the film. That's my favorite death. That's my favorite death of the film.
I think it's mine too, though. Again, I think the RV kill is just so good, and they do
100%.
the head through the head shot is really great too.
Mhm.
In that one, we didn't really talk about it, but like that fight sequence
In the back, yeah.
is yeah, in the bathroom is actually really good.
Mhm.
Um, I love that this is the first time I don't hate the sheriff character in these movies.
Exactly, exactly. Because
I
it's a
love
trope.
it.
It's a
I do.
trope. It's a trope
Yeah.
it gets overused in horror franchises. He's made well in this one.
I it's the same. It's so funny because I mean, not to jump it really far ahead before we get to Never Hike Alone, but I think that's why I was so happy that they ended up bringing Rick Cologne back and
Right.
having him as a character later because it does feel aftermathy and you
Mhm.
feel these characters and even him like I don't you don't like him, but I don't hate the character either. He's so cocky and kind of a dick, obviously. The
Yeah.
and again, so like wherever the red dot goes, ya
Yeah,
bang.
bang.
And you're just like, God, you're so dumb. And yet I kind of dig the character because you do understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a little dumb. He is exactly the point. He's dumb, but he's not like uh, overly overbearing kind of. Yeah, I agree. I agree with me. He kind of
Yeah.
fits a lot of the bad tropes we see, but yet for whatever reason, whether it's Russian or not, you still kind of like the character. He's still trying his best overall. He does everything he's supposed to do. Like yeah, it's a good. I like the
And
character as
honestly,
well. And he means well. He obviously means
he
well as
does. He
well.
means well. And honestly, he should be thanking Tommy and Megan because without them locking him away in the cell, he'd probably be dead.
How long is he locked away there? That's what I want to know. Like, cause like, the
That's a great
sheriff's dead,
question.
the deputies are dead. Like, how long is I'm sure Tommy Megan kind of probably forgot about him, to be honest. Poor guy, poor bastard.
God, it's just so good though, man. Like God, I just really love this movie. I mean, even this third act finale, I love that it comes back to just trying to get Jason in the water. Like it's such a simple thing. And it's
Mm,
not that he's scared of water, it's about trying to take him back to this all started in Crystal Lake with him coming out of the water. We're going to take him back there and end all this.
Well, again, I know we bring up the Crystal Lake doc. So by now, if you haven't watched it, you haven't been definitely we take a lot from that doc and love it. I love the
Well,
interview that
it
Tom
adds so much
McLaughlin did.
extra context, Like,
Right,
I love the
absolutely.
doc because it gives me so much extra context that frankly I'd forgotten about since the first time I watched it when it came
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. I love hearing some of the behind the scenes stuff that led to the decisions that led to everything. And Tom McLaughlin had a great interview where he said one of the things that Friday the 13th really didn't have at this point was a lore, was a mythology beyond it. Kind of became this running thing. And to do the gothic franchise that he wanted to, the gothic movie, the gothic version that he wanted to do for this, you kind of need a little bit of a
Yeah.
lore. Now, there's always the danger of going too far in that lore. See Halloween 6. Absolutely, you can only kill it. But this is kind of you have a monster, you have rules you have to set up, and this adds a lot to it because there have been no rules for Jason except for basically that he doesn't die. That's really been the only
Right.
rule you've really seen. But having him, it made sense that you got to return the undead monster to his grave, so to speak. And this kind of makes it seem like what they're saying is that Jason died in the water, even if he came back somehow, but his grave was Crystal Lake. His home is Crystal Lake. He always gravitates back to Crystal Lake. So the
Yeah.
fact that you have him as you like the having Tommy go, okay, I need to drown him back in Crystal Lake. It makes all the sense in the world. Now, I'll be honest, like I chuckled a bit, and like in a lesser movie, I would have been like, oh, come on. Having Tommy reading those weird books that he
Oh
had,
yeah.
like the occult, the dead. I love it.
Yeah.
Really, you're getting your answers from that. Come on now, Tommy. Um, but again, it's because in a lesser movie, I hate that. In this movie, I'm kind of like, that's kind of I chuckled at it. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, having him have that plan makes much more sense than a lot of other things that they try or things they think of. At least it's not off
The
the
other
top
thing
of
that
their head
the
kind
other
of
thing
thing.
that makes me laugh too when you listen to the interview, Tom McLaughlin, they did the same thing where they were going into it, and he was like, they kind of told me, just so you're aware, this is the last one again. But don't kill Jason just yet. But it
Right.
is the last one. Just don't kill
Give him an
Jason.
out.
And you're
Give
like,
him an out.
yeah, give them an out in case they bring him back.
Right. Which they didn't do in 4 really, because honestly, the sliding down the head, like there's nothing technically anything coming back from that, and would have to be a complete revamp, which this is, which it makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense, of course. Um, so okay, so we end up at the camp. Obviously, the sheriff and the deputy is there, and Jason's running wild. Tommy and Megan eventually make it back there, and we kind of skipped over a few of the counselor kills, but they were set up to be exactly that. They were the fodder that Jason was going to have, obviously.
And again, we did cover the one. The thing is
The
you just
court,
don't see it. That's what I love about that moment. Actually, that build
yeah,
is great because the build to it, and then Jason just walking in, and then the door closing, and us not seeing anything other than the body going through the window, and him grabbing it and pulling it back in is perfect.
yeah, absolutely. You know what else we haven't talked about real quick, or I mentioned. I love them myself, and I think, and again, in a lesser movie, they would have been annoying, but in this film, they're funny as anything, and they are kind of like the surrogate for the young nerdy fans who are watching this. Is those
Oh,
two
the 2
boys,
kids?
the two kids,
Yeah.
like what
You
were you
know,
going to be when you grew up?
well, one of the things that I also love is like the movie starts so much like the other ones. And there's
Mhm.
that line of if this is the most excitement we're getting out of this, we're in
We're in
big
trouble,
trouble. And I
dude.
love how like it's such a commentary on the movie itself
Yeah. That's what I
in
mean.
the
Again,
franchise.
it's that audience entry point to a degree.
Yeah.
Because I think most of the horror fans I know are the same kind of way. No matter how old they are, they're kind of kids at heart to a degree. There's kind of that excitement you get out of it, and you kind of like you feel you're a kid at heart when you're watching some of these things. And that's us. That's you. As you like you. I could see you and me being those two kids at
Yeah.
Crystal Lake if we were that age, kind of
We
like.
absolutely would have been. And I do love so what were you gonna be? The one you brought up, it's perfect. It's so good.
Absolutely.
Oh god, man. It's such a damn good movie.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
really,
so
really
fun,
is.
and those little character moments just really make it work.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move on then to the end. Obviously, we're skipping a few of the kills that are good, like the sheriff getting killed, knocked into the boat. That's the headshot.
Yeah.
You get the head crushing of the deputy, which is really good as well, which is
Also,
also edited down, unfortunately.
can we just talk about the Jason being shot over and over and over again moments that Garrus has? That is
Yeah,
so great.
it is.
It just the way it's played up is so good.
It is absolutely. I love it, and it's like a do. If in case you didn't realize that Jason was in like immortal zombie, now here you go.
Yeah.
Let me hit you over the head with this one.
It's just so
Um,
perfect, man.
it is. It's great. But Tommy starts getting his plan together. His plan involves a boat, some gasoline, which I'm not sure what part of the gasoline was supposed to play, except for the fact that it looks cool, uh, and the
That's
big old
exactly it. I
rock.
believe you just answered
I did.
your
I
own
really
sentence there. It is there because it looks cool. That's it.
did.
No,
That's it.
no more, no less. It looks cool. Yay,
And
congratulations. Fire.
exactly. You don't. I mean, you question it for a half a heartbeat, but you totally accept it because it looks cool. The idea is basically he takes the big old rock and the big old chains. Are going to chain Jason up and drag him to the bottom of the lake. And that's pretty much what we get. Jason walks out to the boat, which again I love. I love the fact he's this monster. He's like just going to walk there. Doesn't care. He's going to go under the water. He just keeps walking. He's walking. He gets there. Not swimming. Jason doesn't swim. He just walks to the bottom of Crystal Lake until he gets there. Uh,
Yep.
what a great fight sequence there at the end. It's pretty powerful. Tommy and Jason going back and forth until finally he starts the fire that looks cool that wraps around the boat. Which the funny thing that's why I question it to a degree though is like so he sets the boat on fire or sets the water around him on fire. Does that make it? I think that makes it harder for him to grab Jason around the
I mean,
neck
of
at this
course it
point.
does, but does that matter? It's a horror
It
movie. Does
doesn't.
it
It
matter?
doesn't.
No, it
No, it
doesn't because
doesn't.
we just
It
want
doesn't.
fire.
Right.
We want it to look
Exactly.
epic. And you know what makes things epic? Fire.
Fire. Okay, Beavis. As most horror fans of me. But we had a good fun sequence there, and Tommy is successful in chaining Jason up around the neck, and Jason gets dragged down to the bottom of Crystal Lake um, to his quote unquote end as we start. He stops moving. But then, of course, Tommy is laying on the surface. He's choked. The life is choked out of him. Jennifer Cooks, Megan runs out, dives in, tries to grab him, and she gets attacked from the lake floor, so it's actually not too far down. She adds the adding insult to injury by slicing and dicing with the boat engine propeller, getting him off of her. And she brings Tommy to the shore, does the absolute worst CPR I've ever seen in any movie. History of movie CPR. This is probably the worst. This is definitely no Ed Harris in the Abyss resuscitation scene.
Of course, you went to the Ed Harris of it all.
I had to. I'm red. All right. Thank you, Winston Marshall, again. Anyway. No, but quite fairly, it's funny because like I know the CPR was a different day. She gives him like a bunch of breaths, and then her like pumping on the chest is like I'm gonna smack him twice, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? But you know what? It's movie magic. It works, and Tommy comes back to life for a happy-ish ending, as it were. Even though I don't remember, does Megan ever find out that her father's dead? I don't think she does she?
I don't think she does, really. I assume that, had they made a movie that was a sequel, we would have gotten there, but we never do.
Yeah, and you know what? It's probably better that she doesn't, because it's nice having her have a happy ending in her mind with Tommy at that point, and the kids being all happy. That's the happy ending we get. Until, of course, we get the out that Mancuso and studio wanted. We pan back to the lake, and whereas we were almost expecting the Jason to come out of the water somehow, because it's kind of like a callback. He does not. We go down, and there's the eye still open. He's not dead. He is just waiting for Carrie to come and revitalize him, pretty much, as we find out.
And man behind the mask starts to play, and you're like, yes, Alice Cooper. And if there's a dance party in the theater, and before the Swifties were dancing in the theater aisles, we were all dancing to Alice Cooper at the theater.
Right. Absolutely. Good stuff. So then that's where we end on this film.
God, it's so good. This movie is awesome. Like,
do we even complain about anything?
What do you complain about? This movie is. I'm getting all hyped up and excited again. The caffeine is really starting to kick in, but I'm like, God, you think about this movie and it's perfect. It's perfect how it is. That's why it's so good. Like, this movie understood exactly what it needed to be coming off of 5 to try to get the audience back in. And the audience who saw it and gelled with it and saw what it was going for embraced it for that. And that, I think, is why this movie in particular, when we talk about the Friday films, we've both said that this franchise has 2 all-time great slasher films in it, 4 and 6. There's a reason that they are constantly touted as 2 of the pillars of this entire genre of filmmaking. And this movie in particular, again, I don't think that we get Scream. I don't think we get Bride of Chucky. I don't think we get a lot of the more meta, even Cabin in the Woods. Like, I was going to actually joke about that earlier, is like, there's a part of me that believes that the Cabin in the Woods people are behind all of Jason's coming back and killing everyone. Like, there's a world where that whole joke about what that movie is and what it's doing, that's why Jason is how he is. And I love that this movie in particular, because of Tom McLaughlin's like very specific look of taking a known slasher franchise and being so fun and meta with it, it leads to something so fun and so special. This movie rules. Like, it is so fun to watch. It's so brisk at 86 minutes, and it just does the thing it needs to do. There's a reason that we still talk about it, and we can do a 2.5-hour podcast talking about this movie.
100%, man. It's a fun film, and as a 6th installment of the franchise. 6th installment. That's what you got to keep going back to. When you talk about most horror franchises, it's the first film that gets the due, right? It's always like Halloween 1 is the greatest of the franchise. Nightmare 1 is probably the greatest of the franchise, because they are the original ones, and everything after that is diminishing returns. And a franchise that had diminishing returns, it stepped up its ball game for 4, and for the second time in the franchise, it really stepped up its ball game for 6. And there's something we said about reinventing the wheel just enough where it makes not only its own mark, but actually probably inspires horror for years to come. I would say even more than the original did, because the original was pretty much a ripoff of Halloween. 6 is its own thing, and definitely unique enough of its time, where while there are other horror comedies out there, we just mentioned the Tom Matthews and the Return of the Living Dead, which is definitely kind of a similar kind of send up on the franchise in a way. Jason Lives sets it up as we can do this with an established horror icon. Whereas like the Return of the Living Dead doesn't have an established horror icon. They're zombies. It's like a more of a monster. It's a faceless monster, so to speak. This is an iconic movie franchise character that you can turn on its heels a little bit and still make a very, very successful successful entry that doesn't kill the franchise. It makes it better and makes the franchise better by doing so.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why ultimately at the end of the day, I think we keep coming back to it and we keep talking about it, and it continues to be a pinnacle within this, entire genre. It's just 100%. Great.
100%. Any last?
You know what?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, we're gonna jump into the ratings, but I'm just gonna say it. Like, I kind of alluded to it before when we were even talking about this. There was only one of these movies I was gonna give the perfect score to,
and this one.
Here's our boy. This is it.
Well,
this is the perfect 11.
Let's break into it here. And even though you just jumped the gun on me a little bit, it's okay. I usually give our franchise things first. Friday the 13th, we gave out a scale of 1 to 11 because we always turned up to 11 here on PLD Projects. The original Friday the 13th, you gave it 6.5. I gave it 6. That's amazing to me. The original of the franchise, 6.5 and 6. Compare that to Halloween, where the Halloween was the perfect 11. Friday the 13th Part 2, we thought elevated a little bit. You went to 8.5. I went to a 7. Friday the 13th Part 3, we both gave a 7. I thought it kind of maintained. Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, you gave that a 10 on your perfect score. I gave it a 9.5, right close by there. We both dipped back for Friday the 13th Part 5. You gave that a 6. Your worst of the franchise so far. I gave it a 5.5, also worst of the franchise. So you're giving Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, a perfect 11. I don't know if I can disagree. When we had this conversation, when I wrote down, usually when I come to the podcast, I've already filled in my score.
Yeah, I know how you operate.
I do. But I change it if I feel like I had the conversation. Sometimes we change our things. And I was vacillating a little bit. I had it as a 10.5. I'm not going to lie. But in a world, I think I can't really deny that this is really a perfect movie as far as the franchise goes. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm also someone who has ranked this franchise previously, and nostalgia does come into play a little bit. And I'm someone who loves our next film in the franchise, Part 7, because that was my first Friday film. So a lot of nostalgia attached to that. So I almost didn't want to give this a perfect 11 when I know that I might actually end up liking the 7th film better. Maybe. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Honestly, not gonna lie.
You're damn right it is.
But I think I can't deny after watching this, after watching the documentary, after thinking about it, having this conversation with you, where I can't even my negatives and my nitpicks are done with a wink and a nudge and a fun, like, it's still pretty fun. It's so fun. It's still like it's silly, but it's fun. So I think I gotta give it 11. I'm gonna go ahead and go give it an 11 as well. We're gonna both give it a
there 11. It is. There's a reason, again, we keep talking about it, right? Like, this is the movie. Again, rockin' soundtrack, maybe the best score, that cast, the dialogue, everything about this movie is the perfect culmination of what this franchise should be and should continue to be.
Mm-hmm. It reinvents the franchise in a new and different and fun way. And it's only a little preview for next week. It's only fitting that they actually thought of doing a Jason versus Freddy at this point, because what else can you do? What else could Friday the 13th Part do at this point? Like, it had its build up. It had the final chapter, which is kind of the end of that particular saga. It has this 6th reinvention. You can't have a film, the next film in the franchise can't be exactly like this again, because then it's like a retread. You got to kind of explore new grounds. Exploring new grounds is putting Jason up against somebody who actually stands a chance against him. I mean, Tommy obviously wins, but having someone who's like powerful like him that can go up against him, having that franchise like that. So I think that the idea, even though we don't get the Elias Voorhees out of it because of it, which I completely understand, having that be the next entry, I think was a solid choice. Was a smart decision, at least creatively. Obviously, box office wise, ends up being more diminishing returns for our boy. I think it's also partly because the slasher route at this point had gotten a little tired. I think of people in general, not just in the Friday the 13th, but like in general, there's just so many slashers and so many.
Like, it starts to be overwhelming. Yeah,
it's too much. It's done being too much, and so it's like, well, all that out there, I don't need to watch another Friday the 13th movie. I've seen them all at this point. But I think people missed out. I missed out quite a bit on what was a really good run at this point. So absolutely, I can't wait to talk about 7 next week for sure. Any last things you want to say about 6? Anything you want to get off your chest before we wrap this up?
No, man. I love this movie. I'm glad we got to talk about it and we could spend so much time reminding people why it's as good as it is. Like
Uh,
there's and if you've never seen it and this was your first time and you watched it because we were covering it here, I'm stoked for you because what a cool movie to get to experience and I hope you would enjoyed it as much as we enjoy it. Like this is a movie I grew up watching that I will always have a soft spot. And
Absolutely.
again, I think it actually played a part in where our horror movie love continues to go to this day and has had such a massive effect. So, it's just a very great film, man.
It is. It is. It's a great film. It's a great time for film. It's a great time for the slasher franchise for that. Despite the diminishing returns in the box office, looking back, box office might have been great, but creatively speaking, this was a good setup for the rest of the film and the rest of the genre and the franchise, as it were. Yeah, absolutely. And I can't wait to talk about 7. What a great run. What a great run of films there. So, all right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film. Yes, PJ, where can the folks find you?
Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell, Blue Sky, Threads, wherever PJ Campbells are sold, you will find me there. Hanging out here with this gentleman. Yeah, pretty much that's it, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find me at Paul_Denuzio on the old Twitter. You can find me at PLD Projects and Threads, Paul Denuzio on Blue Sky, all that kind of stuff. You can find me all over here, all over PLD Projects. Absolutely. We do two Mediocre White Dudes on Film every other week. I do review every other week, myself and Lego, going through the V franchise, as I mentioned earlier, starring Jennifer Cook of Friday the 13th, Part 6 fame. I also do a weekly podcast with Maddie Gunner, Holy Snokes. Best wishes to Maddie. He had some struggles this week. That's why we had to cancel him last week. He's coming back for this week's episode, although we are pushing it to Thursday. I'm going to actually swap. We have review coming out this week. Review usually comes out on Thursday. Holy Snokes usually on Wednesday. We're going to switch that. Review is going to come out on Wednesday because Maddie is traveling. So Thursday we will come out with our Holy Snokes episode where we're going to look at the future works of the Star Wars franchise post-strike and see what's going to come up, kind of preview all of that. And of course, I do Crown Jewels, the Queen podcast I do on my sister YouTube channel, PLD Project Crown Jewels, all in the same audio feed, though, if you're listening on the audio side of things. So great. If this is the first time here, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, leave a comment, question. We like talking with people in the comments. We enjoy it quite a bit. Hopefully you have a lot to say. And if you want to support the channel even further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. Really helps fuel the site, really keeps the lights on, and such stalwart crews such as Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kern, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman could not do this without you guys, and a whole other bunch of crew members as well. Had another hangout on Sunday. Try to do hangouts every month. We have some extra content coming our way. That's where the Harris Dons lies. I talk about one Edward Allen Harris and all of his IMDb credits. And PJ and I had one Doctor Who episode on there. We haven't really gone back to do more, but we will at some point.
We've been busy. I'm sorry.
It is. It's true. We did 2. We did 2 episodes. I think we did the Doctor Who movie starring Paul McGann, and then we did Waters of Mars from David Tennant. We were definitely going to add more to that lexicon at some point for sure, especially as we get excited about Doctor Who. But if you can't do Patreon, I completely understand that as well. It's financial times are rough and everything else, but you can always help out the channel just by sharing, liking, like I said, and get people to listen. Bring us more. Let's make this a community a wonderful one. Yeah, I think that'll do it. Next time, like we said before, Friday the 13th, Part 7.
Jason versus Carrie.
Jason versus Carrie. We'll see you there. Bye now.